Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is my pre-show live stream for episode 9 of House of the Dragon, and I am honoured, nay delighted, to have as my very special guest Matt from Joe Magician. Do you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, it's been so long, Robert. It's only been like 6 weeks or something like that since we saw each other last. It's an eternity at this point. Yeah, this episode, the season's winding down. We're getting to um the exciting parts, I'll say. I think not
Yeah.
not a spoiler to say we're getting to the exciting parts of this season. And yeah, this is going to be a hell of an episode.
It is absolutely, yeah, you're back by popular demand. I should probably say people kept every single time questions would come up about whatever crazy theory you've come up with this week. So we will be covering all of those during the course of this live stream. And if you wish to ask Matt about one of his, I say crazy theories, they're actually quite good theories, which is why everyone's talking about them.
They could be good and crazy at the same time, Robert.
You absolutely can, and I'm sure we can think of some characters in the show who are both. But drop some questions into the chat. As always, I'm going to try and frame these around questions from my patrons. A couple of just little bits of housekeeping before we get going. This is a charity live stream, as all of my live streams through the show have been in aid of Alzheimer's care and research. Alzheimer's is an horrific disease. If you've ever encountered it, those you love have had it. It affects the people around that person as much as, if not more than, the person themselves. And the way we can combat this is by caring for people, but also through research. What I'm trying to do here is say, if you're enjoying the show, if you enjoy these live streams, if you wish to show your appreciation and you can afford it, there is a donate button somewhere. So please, could you do that? The other thing in terms of spoilers is to say my attitude through these live streams is book spoilers are okay, but show spoilers are not okay. And we shall come clean up front. Matt and I have both seen episode 9, so we're not going to tell you what happens in it. I
Yeah.
think we're both going to say this was a good episode.
We're dirty HBO shills. We've seen it already.
We're not shills. I've had enough of that on the other side of my Lord
You
of
didn't
the
get your
Rings
check?
side.
Oh, weird.
No, I've not got my. If you've got your check, then congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
You're doing better out
It's
of this
all
than
in
I am.
Hawaiian shirts at this point. That's what I'm spending it on.
That's what HBO pay you in, is it? Excellent.
Yeah, right. Oh, by the way, we are not getting paid by HBO. Just a joke.
Just a joke, absolutely. So that's where we're at. But so far, just as a sort of overall comment, you've been enjoying the show. That I think I had you on roughly before episode 2, 3, something like that. Have you been enjoying it? What are your overall thoughts on the last 6 weeks or whatever we had?
I think it's been excellent. I think they bit off a huge piece of meat basically to try and make a 30-year time jump prequel season 1. And that's a hard thing to do. And I think they've done pretty much as well as they can, while also managing to put in a lot of depth, at least for a lot of the main characters, and introducing things that fans like us were disappointed to see sort of de-emphasized in Game of Thrones as it went along, particularly elements of fantasy and magic and that kind of stuff. And they've sort of woven them back in with just very small touches. And it's been very gratifying to just be like, I wonder if this weird thing is happening, like this weird magical thing in the background. And the show's like, yeah, it is. Good job, you.
Absolutely, and particularly things like the prophecies, that's been a huge part of this, and we'll get questions about this coming up later. But the way that they've clarified certain characters' motivations, that in Fire and Blood, because of the medium that George R. Martin used for that, some characters, it was quite mysterious about what they were about, what drove them. We've got a lot more clarity on quite a few of these characters, including one character in particular. So we'll come on to this one straight away, because I know this is why a lot of people are tuning in to hear Matt talk about this guy. George R. Tolkien says, "Salutations, Robert. You've got Joe on. Now you can ask him about the Larys Strong theory." So let's start all of this. This is, the question I've been asked in reference to you and your theories the most over the last few weeks, it has to be said. So Larys Strong in the books, I'll give a little preamble, and then I'll basically just say go, and you can tell us what's going on in your brain with this one. Larys Strong in the books was quite a mysterious figure. We never really knew whose side he was on. We never knew what motivated him. We didn't really all the time know exactly what he was doing. There were some hints he might have been involved in certain things, but here this has been made very clear um, about what sort of character he is. And the Strongs as well, without prejudging where you're going to go with this one, the Strongs have been set up as a really important family here on the show. And there's a clear link across to the Weirwood tree. The Weirwood tree has been very present in this show in a way that I think took all of us by surprise. The fact that there is a Weirwood tree in the Red Keep at this point was never 100% clarified, and now it's there. It obviously disappears later, but they've used it in almost every episode. It has to be said, apart from that bottle episode when they had on Driftmark. Almost every episode, an important conversation happens in front of the Weirwood tree. So, Lara Strong, Weirwoods, what's going on, Matt? Explain it to us.
Okay, so what happened was before episode 3, I think, I was just sort of sitting back during my lunch break at work, and I was just like, they've been showing the Weirwood a lot. They're about to introduce Larys, like we had seen the previews and stuff like that. I was like, all right, he's showing up. I'm like, what's going on here? Is because in the past, on my channel, I did a whole bunch of streams just about the Strongs, like one character after another. I did Harwin, I did Larys. I didn't do one about Lionel because we didn't know that much about him, but then went through and did like Lucamore the Lusty and some secret Strongs like Duncan the Tall. And the number one thing about them is that George really likes having them act like they're characters out of time. Like they're from a different age almost. They're like they act like crazy first men or like guys from beyond the wall, but they're somehow connected to the Faith of the Seven and that kind of stuff. Well, it turns out they're extremely old, and I think the reason George likes using them is he likes using them as stand-ins for the Starks when he doesn't have them in the story yet. They sort of fill the same role. And going off of all of that, I was all that in my head just sort of swirling around. I'm like, so they're doing a lot more magic. They led off with Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy. They're doing this Weirwood shit. What can they do with the Weirwoods? I was like, Larys, he fits. He fits every one of these things. I'm like, he is Bloodraven. He's Bloodraven before he shows up. The spy master who knows everything, connection to the old gods in the Riverlands, Lord of Harrenhal. They're going to obviously have him set up so that he knows everything. That's one of the things that always kind of stuck out about him as a character, is that he is sort of better than everyone else. Even better than, like, he's almost like Littlefinger and Varys kind of combined to like one super spy master character. You said book spoilers are fine. Larys ends up basically ruling King's Landing from like a room somewhere in Flea Bottom, despite the fact there are crazy factions going on in between it. And it's like, how is he doing this? It's like, well, he just seems a lot like a Greenseer. And he has like the same thing with Bran and different other characters, where George likes to give characters with disabilities like he likes to give them magical powers. It's a theme not only in A Song of Ice and Fire, but a ton of his other books. So it all just kind of fits. And I was honestly just trying to think of a theory to make. And I was like, I think this all works. And then I typed it up and I was about to hit publish. I'm like, you know what? This is a stupid idea. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I'm going to post this on my channel. Nobody's going to watch it. They're going to call me crazy. And then like the next couple of days, as Robert can attest, everybody started talking about it because the episode came out with the Weirwood in the face. It was after episode 3 I did this. So episode 4 came out and they did a thing where Larys's voice is literally coming out of the Weirwood. By the way, I wrote this theory before any of that. I didn't know any of that was coming. And then all the podcasts in the world, every single YouTube channel I've been annoying because, as Robert said, everyone's asking him about it. And it just seems like every time you're like, something could come up for it, they just keep throwing hints at it that Larys is up to something much larger than the average spy master. And I think it's just, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it goes nowhere. Maybe it is just that he's exceptionally good at his job. But with their focus on fantasy and magic and the upcoming connections with Alice Rivers and all the weirdness about Harrenhal we have coming, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually do go down this path. And they're probably just, I was saying this on my stream with Sanrixian. If I was one of the Hot D writers and I had actually written this in as like a very subtle thing I was going to put in through the season, and then maybe like season 2 or 3, I finally reveal it, I would just be like, what the hell? How did some YouTuber get this before we even put in our first hint with the Weirwood face?
So is at a basic level, how strong are their they're old, they're an ancient
Very
family.
old. George says one of the oldest.
One of the oldest. And they're one of the first men. So
Yeah.
theoretically, they may have some of this kind of like the green seer blood in them.
Mhm.
Now, Laris, therefore, potentially is a green seer.
Sure.
He potentially can see through the Weirwood network. What does that mean in terms of his motivations then? Is he
Ooh.
Does that make any difference? Does that mean that he's suddenly on team Bloodraven? Because my big theory, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven.
Yeah.
But what does this actually mean? Where does he actually fit in? What's he trying to do?
So the thing that really struck out to me is that if you look at what's going on right now, with everything with the blacks and the greens, there is a turning point. And the turning point is Alison when she's standing in front of the Weirwood tree and she's crying after her father just blamed her for everything that's going to happen. And you sort of get the feeling that there's a chance that Alison just sort of says, this isn't worth it. I'm on my own. Nobody's here to help me. My father's gone. Rhaenyra, like, she's my friend. She'll take care of me. But Larys just kind of walks up and delivers that punch to her, and shatters her reality. And it's from there going forward, everything that's happened so far and will happen is because of that moment. And that's the kind of thing that green seers in George's world love doing. They love finding that one little moment of destiny to poke at and change everything. I mean, they did versions of that in season 8 with Bran with the dagger, and also with his telling Sam about John's true parentage. But the key things were that they were just like these small little moments that let everything he wanted to happen. So as to what you're saying, like, what could he really want? Where could this go? I mean, the sky's the limit. If he actually is a green seer, these guys can see the future. These guys can dream as well. Their motives can be kind of crazy. And the thing I sort of latched onto in my second Larys video is that when the first men and the Andals invaded, both times the children tried with basically to cause disasters to stop the invaders that were coming. The Hammer of Waters to destroy the Arm of Dorne, and then they tried another one that didn't really work at the neck. And it kind of makes sense to me that if he's working with the Children of the Forest and he's sort of a green seer, you could sort of see as this moment what Larys did with Alison, kind of like that, because to them the Targaryens are the invaders. It fits perfectly with the idea of the Children of the Forest and the Weirwoods, that they would want to quell the incursion of the Valyrian Empire into their homelands. And as we see with what happens with Game of Thrones, it's probably they very quickly use the Targaryens and then very quickly get them off the throne as fast as they can. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's like some kind of long-term plan to use them to fight the White Walkers and then have them go away. And having the House of the Dragon fight itself, as it's clearly on a trajectory upwards to become a new Valyria, is perfectly in keeping with the kind of the stuff that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So in anyone's book, the Dance of the Dragons definitely is a turning point in terms of the Targaryen rule, because it could have carried on growing exponentially in terms of the number of Targaryens and the number of dragons. Something massive had to happen. And if there is anyone who was going to try and stop that from happening, then maybe the Weirwood Network is the people to person. I don't even know how to describe it. The thing to blame.
Consciousness thing.
The consciousness. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. So I think this works really well for me. I'm fascinated to see where they might go with it. In particular, because we had this moment a couple of episodes ago where Larys there asks for a favor in advance. Andy Q says, what favor do you think Larys will ask? It's likely to be something pretty significant. Will it simply be a position of power or something more fitting for his twisted mind? Now, I find this fascinating because in the book, then there's no obvious thing that he like gets this, oh, suddenly you're like, I will make you what. He's already Lord of Harrenhal. He's like effectively Master of Whispers already. There's no big thing there that it might be. And also there was a big setup effectively for hey, Alison, when you want me to do something big and terrible, just just wink, and I'll go off and do something even bigger and more terrible than you imagine. So have you got any idea? Is there something in the book that we've just not attributed to him, or do you think this is something new that we might get from the showrunners and the writers here?
So that's one of the things that's really been expanded. As you said, we know very little about Larys and his motivations from the book. There's actually a full paragraph in Fire and Blood where George just goes like, boy, isn't he mysterious? Nobody knows what he's about. Baby, you can figure it out, you clever reader. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's try and figure it out. One thing they've definitely been setting up is that Larys seems to have some kind of personal connection to Alison, that he's focusing on her in a very strange way. So there could be something about that, but in a larger sense, someone like him, the favor he wants could be, who knows? As you're saying, it could be enormous. It could be something like he wants like a marriage with somebody at some point, like maybe like actually in one of my latest videos, I theorized about a kind of weird connection between him and Helena. Like if he starts realizing that she can see the future and that he's on that kind of side of the world too, maybe there's something there where he's like interested in her in like kind of like a magical way, in like maybe like a House in the Black and White way. But the thing is, they've set him up so that the obvious answers for what he would want are really unobvious. Like he killed his family, so that's not really helping. As you said, he's the Lord of Harrenhal, so he's gonna have all the wealth and all the power he wants. There's no like there's no Sansa out there like Littlefinger, I guess. Or I guess maybe Alison could stand in for Sansa. But if his goals are truly magical, the things he could want, and the way that, going back to how he pushed Alison into this war, because she's making it happen. Without her, Otto never comes back. Like this never happens. The Greens are upset for a while. Like they have to make some marriage pacts. It goes nowhere. It's Larys that's making it happen. So when you're thinking about somebody who's thinking that big, it's I don't really know where they're going with this, but it should be something super surprising.
Well, I did have one thought, which is my contribution to the Larys is a weirwood sympathizer trying to get rid of the dragons kind of thing. What if, because we know two things about the end of this story for them, if this is a setup for the end of season 4 or whenever this is, Alison does survive the dance, not by long, but she does survive the dance. Larys also just about survives the dance until reaches a point. Exactly, until it reaches a point where hashtag spoilers, but he basically goes, all right, you can kill me, it's okay. Which I've read every time I've read Fire and Blood, it always goes, really? That's just, it felt like a little bit not Larys. We don't know huge amounts about him, but it felt like a little bit odd that he could say, okay, that's it, I'm okay, and I'm done now. And this is Hour of the Wolf time, so this is being sacrificed by Cregan Stark in front of a weirwood, perhaps. So maybe he's okay with this being sucked up into the weirwood.
Sure.
But why would he would give up his life because he feels he's achieved the thing he's there for. So this is my contribution to the tinfoil in this one, is that he says to Alicent, I now need you to gather together for me all of the dragon eggs or something along those lines, because what we know is someone in that period, I've always blamed the Maesters, but hey, maybe it's not the Maesters, someone poisoned the dragon eggs. And a lot of them were in King's Landing at the time. Maybe he's the person who does that. If he is part of the Weirwood Network, if he did prompt the Dance of the Dragons because he wants the dragons to die, and now he knows we need to stop more dragons coming. We've got them down to 3 or 4. We need to stop new ones being born. Maybe he's the person who does it. I don't know. It's a possibility, but we'll have to wait and see. I've almost made him speechless there.
Well, that's a good one. Also, I had never really thought about this before, but in a sense, the Lord of Winterfell executing a green seer is kind of a fun little thing there going on if it's actually true. Like
Yeah,
almost like a punishment from the North about maybe Laris had gone too far. I think one thing that I think they should do with Laris that they haven't done before is they should introduce the idea that maybe he's wrong about some things because um so many characters try to dance with prophecy, as we've seen with Viserys, and it ends up destroying them. It would be really interesting if we see him more like a Euron figure, someone that is sort of trying to push things in a particular way, and he's trying to challenge something, and it ends up kind of blowing up in his face. Because you're right, it does kind of, at the end of it, it's like, really? You got caught by this? This is the after
yeah.
everything you've done, you got caught by Cregan Stark of all people. Like that shouldn't happen. But there's also a sense of doom to a lot of Green Seers. Like Jojen Reed, for instance, talks for many chapters, and in the show before he dies, he's like, "Oh, I'm about to die. Like this is it. Like I've already seen it. We're out of here." Bloodraven in the show, when the Night King shows up, he doesn't even try and stop him. He's like, "Yeah, my story is over here." And I think that's
Mm.
kind of a thing that maybe something we could, as you were saying, theorize on Laris in the future. That is maybe sort of the point. He knows in the future one day Cregan's going to chop his head and his foot off, and he's like, "All right, now it's here. There's no avoiding it. I've done my part."
Yeah, and I think that makes absolute sense. Yeah, I was actually I'm listening through very slowly. I'm listening through A Song of Ice and Fire again, and I'm about a third of the way through Clash of Kings, the first chapter that Mira and Jojen appear in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that struck me actually, that when the two of them sneak into the Godswood to meet the direwolves,
Mm-hmm.
and Mira saying, "Be careful, Jojen, they're quite scary." And he goes, "It's okay, this isn't the day I die." And
Yeah,
it's just like, and it's just, yeah, okay, so you know this. It's very, very blatant. Agree Weirwood just saying Monken in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. I think
sure.
he's still my favorite, if I have to be honest. He is the most suspicious character in all of the latter half of Fire and Blood, I have to say. And also, just a very quick shout out, Foley in the chat saying, "Hey, I was one of your earliest subscribers when your subs were in the low hundreds. I deserve a hello from you." You even responded to my comments. Well, hello to you. It's great to see you still sticking around. But let's go with a few questions.
Sure.
Let's move on to Kings Road was saying, talking about Aemond and Daemon. In the last episode, we saw Aemond and Daemon for the first time. What do you think the current dynamic between the two is? I thought it was awesome to see Daemon move Jace on and then stare down Aemond like
Mm-hmm.
you'd expect your dad to do if you're bullied in primary school. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So George R. R. Martin has very clearly set up an echoing of characters here. They're quite similar in temperament. They're also the second sons. Their brother is the king or claimed king, but they're the real go out and do exciting stuff
Mm-hmm.
kind of character, and also they're a little bit scary to be in the same room with kind of character. But what do you think? What do you think the dynamic is there between the two of them? This is quite an early stage.
Sure. So one thing to keep in mind about Damon and Aemond, I mean, other than the fact that their names are exactly the same, it's just
Yeah.
they moved the D to the end of it, which is a fun George trick, just to let you know they're basically the same guy, is that the two of them, as far as the show is concerned, don't really know each other. I think the first time they met each other was at the funeral for Lena, and then we've seen that that Damon has stayed on Dragonstone basically for the last 6 years. So they really the only connection they have is that Aemond has heard of Daemon a lot. He's heard a lot of stories about him, and he would probably hear about them from the different members of the Red Keep and his father and Alison and stuff like that. So he's a person that he knows by reputation, and the reputation that he likes is the one that he has adopted, the kind of militant second son. While the main heir is kind of whichever one we're talking about, Eamon is not a fan of. and sort of the idea that if he's gonna have a life at court, and if he's gonna be more than just like his older brother is, a drinking, molesting shithead, then he's gonna have to make it himself because nobody's gonna look out for him. And I think it's interesting that you see that Aemond has really decided that Daemon is his hero. Well, okay, his hero in terms of the kind of person he wants to be. And you see when he cuts off Vaemon's head. I actually put this on YouTube the other day on the community thing, and I was just going across the reactions. And you look at Aegon, and he's like, "Oh shit." And you look at Helena, and she's freaked out, puts her hands over her ears. You look at Otto, and he's like, "Oh no." Alison's freaking out, but Aemon is like, "Oh, you can do that? You can just cut people's heads off? That's a thing you can do?" And it's sort of the idea that it's kind of like a hero worship of how to be a important prince, and that's sort of the life that he has in front of him at this point, because Aegon at this point has 2 kids already, or at least 2. I don't know if we're going to see. Well, Helena talked about it in the last episode that Diana had to change the kids or something like that. So at least 2, maybe 3 at this point. Aemond is looking at a life where he's going to be forever unimportant at court. He's going to have to make his own destiny if he wants it. I think that's kind of what he gets out of Daemon, but he also clearly is super ambitious, and he loves the way. I imagine we might actually hear something about the stepstones, like that whole story about Daemon rushing at the pirates, like running through the beach, dodging the arrows, killing the crab feeder, coming out with his corpse. Like, you can imagine that's the kind of thing that has become sort of legendary at court. And you imagine Aemon is the kind of kid that has heard every single story and absorbed them.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I think the only thing I would add to this, I did a video with History of Westeros a few days ago, I think, about Vhagar. And one thing to just note, and they're trying in the show to give us different characteristics for the dragons, which I think is an excellent thing. Vhagar, let's not forget, Vhagar was Daemon's dad's dragon, and then it was Daemon's wife's dragon. And then at the funeral for Daemon's wife, in comes Aemond and steals Vhagar. At least that's the way, the extent to which one can steal a dragon is probably debatable, but that must be the way it must have felt, that this was a dragon which was quite close to him from most of his life. All the time he was growing up, and then his married life, this was a dragon that we get told they would sort of like fly together and effectively dance together, and then suddenly Vhagar is now on the other side. So that adds, particularly when we know what will be happening later in the book, that adds an entirely new kind of dimension to the relationship between those 2 dragons, and by extension, the dragon riders. So I hope they emphasize that, the link between the different dragons, but because that should play out into the different riders.
Sanrixian and I were talking about that during my last stream, about how much we know that the rider and the dragon are very, very close. They've made that clear. We were wondering how much of the rider goes into the dragon when they die. Like, is it something like the Weirwoods? Like, does some part of their personality live on? It would be interesting if Aemon's clear affection, or I don't even know if affection, admiration of Daemon comes from the idea that Vhagar has had riders before who had great affection for him as well. If it's like somehow crossing over in a way, because we saw earlier in the season that when Daemon got hit with an arrow, Caraxes roared. When they drew swords on Daemon, Caraxes like came out from the keep. He didn't say a word. So there's clearly something very, very deep going on. I would love it. I would love it if they're playing with that in some way, that like maybe Aemon didn't think much of Daemon before, but now after taking Vhagar, there's been some sort of melding of him and Vhagar's personality, and now he's like, oh, I like Daemon now. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, that's fascinating, mate. And yeah, to the extent that he almost tries to be him in the way that he's acting.
He's dressing like him. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I reckon Matt Smith could probably rock an eye patch as well. Let's go to some questions about Alison and the sort of big reveal, tweak to the law, whatever you want to call it, at the end of last episode. Andy Q was saying, what do you think about how the show handled Alicent hearing that Viserys wanted Aegon to be king? Clearly, what he said couldn't really be taken like she took it, coupled with the fact that he was dying and rambling and had always supported Rhaenyra. Creative Branches saying, I liked how they gave Alison an honourable reason to back Aegon and create the Green Council. The behind-the-scenes and non-book clarity, and my favourite, becoming clear, like Larys clearly being behind the burning of Harrenhal, Alison misinterpreting Viserys' words, are my favourite parts of the show. Do you predict any more behind-the-scenes revelations from this season? Well, let's start with talking about well, yeah, exactly. Let's start talking about this moment, because it wasn't in the book.
No.
This, and I've said this with lots of different people on this live stream over the last few weeks. Alison, from the book, I don't know anyone who read the book who came out going, "Oh, that Alison, I understand where she's coming from. She's quite a nice person." Everybody thought Alison was quite a schemer and didn't like her. Now we understand a bit about where she's come from. Whether you like her or not, you kind of understand. And this was deliberately an attempt, or clearly, in my view, an attempt to give her a reason, a final reason why she might have pushed for the war, effectively. Did you like that? Did you think that was a good way of doing this?
Okay, so this is sort of a byproduct of what you were just talking about. Because they've made Alison more of a human, and they've made her a lot more sympathetic, and they've added a lot more personality to her, they've had to go back and square a lot of the terrible things she does from the books with this new identity we have for her. And in my mind, book Alison didn't need this. This wasn't a push from Viserys that she would need to do. Book Alison was kind of like this the entire time, at least as far as we know. I think it does work with the character that they developed for her, that she's very reticent about what she's doing. I mean, she was like her and Aegon after Viserys slapped down the whole Vaemon thing. The camera panned to them, and both of them were like, all right, good. This is over. We don't have to do this anymore. Like, clearly they're going along with this out of a sense of obligation to Otto, and that he's kind of the driving force behind it. I've been kind of waffling back and forth on it, because what he says, the only thing I can think of is that she thinks that he's talking about the dream that he told her when they were at the hunt. And she's like, oh, this is back on. Like, I don't think that she heard what he was saying and like thought about came up with a new idea. I thought it was a reference back to that, and that's why she went with it. And the only thing that really confuses me is, actually, this is a good question for you, Robert. Do you think she knew that he was about to die? Do you think she knew this was his last words? Or is that something she added on afterwards?
I don't think she knew that he was about to die, but I think that everybody knew that he would die soon. I think that it was quite clear that, at some point he would. And anyone who's been around people who die know that quite often this happens after after they see their family, then they feel like that's it, they can go. So it worked, I think, quite well. That I find I agree with you, and also with the question here. I find it wasn't obvious the way that they put it across. It wasn't like if that's in plain text reading, obviously she thinks, what, you think my son should be king, you think I should declare war, launch a coup. That wasn't what he said like that. So the way I interpreted it was, yes, this was going back to that conversation when Viserys was a bit drunk and he was like, what if I made a mistake, kind of thing. And that has been at the back of her mind, and she was wanting to hear it. That's my interpretation. She was always hoping that at some point he would say, you know what, actually, let's go with your ones, your kids rather than the other ones. So I think that's what we're kind of left to assume, is that she didn't, she asked a question, thought, what, my Aegon? And then he doesn't say yes. He just sort of keeps on going, and then he goes
like, "Oh no, Aegon!" It's like something like that.
And then she doesn't even wait. She doesn't wait to hear his final words. She just walks off and says, "I understand." And it's just like it felt very much like she was keen for this moment to happen. So
I think, yeah, I think that's the only way you can go with it, because earlier in the day, I mean, he had not only slapped down this obvious plan, like everyone understood it was nothing about Vaemond, it was everything about Aegon and Rhaenyra, and then he heard her toast to Rhaenyra as the next queen. It's hard to square how within like the last like 3 hours she like clearly had like this huge weight come off of her shoulders, and also that she slapped Aegon around for being a piece of shit and knows that she doesn't think he's going to make a good king anyway. And it's like, why why so hard? It must just be that like she feels extreme duty, or she really cares about Viserys so much that she's going to honor whatever he says, even though she doesn't want to go with it. And that's kind of been her relationship to Otto, basically. She's been kind of railroaded into what's going on. So maybe that's what they were going for.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's they want us to go into the Dance of the Dragons not just thinking, as almost every book reader did, obviously we're Team Black here. Obviously,
Yeah.
that was just a coup. But to actually look at this, and I think they made it harder for themselves by the fact that they humanized Daemon. I think that what they did with that was really good. I like the way that they've changed that character. But if they kept him as a really horrible guy who clearly shouldn't be anywhere near the throne, then it would have been a lot easier to have sympathy with the Greens. Get rid of that, you suddenly have to come up with a reason why, because otherwise you've got Otto, who clearly is scheming behind the Plotto, as I think we're calling him now, and Kristen Cole, who is not the most sympathetic of characters. So I think they needed to have something for us to think, there are two sides to this, even if we think probably we're still Team Black. They didn't want it to be just, here's the good guys, here's the bad guys. But the second half of that question was from Creative Branches saying, do you predict there'll be any more behind the scenes revelations this season or next season like this, where things that were unclear in the book are clear? And yes, this is the way that they're going. I think George R. R. Martin has given the thumbs up to it. I think he's been very happy with what they've done so far. I think there will certainly be some things like, I don't know, Blood and Cheese, for example. We'll get a clarification exactly on how that came about. And also the whole situation later with Rhaenyra and Nettles and Daemon, and exactly what's going on there, because that was left a little bit up in the air. Were they lovers? I presume they must have been lovers, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that that's exactly the case. So I think there will be a few issues where we get some clarification. Can you think of any others that maybe that George left up in the air?
Oh yeah,
they might want to clarify.
The big one's going to be Adam and Alan Velaryon. They're supposed to be Laenor's kids, or his bastard sons. Who they actually are will probably come up at some point. Also, Adam Velaryon and his journey to the Isle of Faces. That one, like, did that actually happen? We're gonna have the Jace Velaryon on his way up to Winterfell, and what exactly happened with him and Sarah Snow. What's another good one? The brothel queens, if that's a real thing or if that actually happens, and then what happened to Helena. I mean, so much tragedy around Helena, but it's all, none of it is direct knowledge. It's all like, I think this happened, I don't know if that happened. We got every single thing about her he put in his little 3 perspective game. So I think we're going to get a ton of revelations about Helena, even more than we already have, that she's a dragon dreamer. Like, just the facts of her life, we're going to learn a lot about.
We've got a question about Helena coming up, but I'm going to pick up on that Adam and Alan, because I had a question. 444 specifically said, question for Joe Magician. So this one's aimed at you direct.
Hello.
What do you predict for Adam and Alan, the plotline in the future seasons? Are the Fire and Blood sources right that these two are Laenor's sons, or maybe Corlys's sons? If not, and Laenor reappears as Adam Velaryon, whose son will Alan be? And why isn't he a dragon rider? So there's a lot going on there. The context for this, and perhaps the reason why you are being asked, is the after the episode when Laenor disappears.
Yeah.
You put up a tweet which I loved, which was just like a picture of Laenor with a fake moustache on, saying,
Right.
"Please welcome Adam Velaryon."
Yeah.
Now, you said that thought actually originally came from Grey Area, so hat tip
Yeah.
there. Pardon me, but that is a fascinating idea that maybe he does re-enter the fray in some way. What do you think? Do you think that is possible, that he might come back as pretending to be Corlys's bastard son?
They have a problem with sea smoke. They have a problem that we've seen dragons in the past when their riders try to leave, they basically follow them. So if Laenor is in Essos, we've also never seen one dragon bond with two people at the same time. So if Laenor doesn't die before Adam shows up, then they're either changing something big about dragon lore or something crazy is going to happen. Yeah, I mean, if Laenor actually comes back and pretends to be Adam, that would be kind of a crazy thing to do. But also, they sort of have to do something crazy because they decide to keep him alive, and it would be kind of crappy to, save his life and then Gendry him, just like have him off at sea rowing for the rest of the story until he shows up somewhere at the end. Like, you want to use him productively, and I don't know. It's a very strange thing, and the problem that everyone has with Adam and Alan even as Corlys's bastards is that he seems so devoted to Rhaenys. It seems kind of crazy that he would cheat on her and have these bastard sons. For people in the chat that don't know what we're talking about, Adam and Alan are supposedly Velaryon dragon seeds or bastards who, after basically everyone dies, they get raised to be the new generation of House Velaryon, and it's through them that the house continues. But they kind of came from nowhere, from a dock worker in Hull, I think is their mother, Marilda of Hull, or something like that. And it's this big whole thing that people are just like, are they really related to these guys, or are they just like random people? Like, whose children are they actually? It's very much a silly idea, though, that Laenor would come back and nobody would recognize him and that he'd just be Adam Velaryon going forwards. But as far as the story's concerned, they should already be alive somewhere. Like, they're old enough when they pop up that they're adults. So they're somewhere on Driftmark at this point. It would be kind of crazy for them to just like invent these people whole cloth. But otherwise, it's very confusing. I don't really know.
I mean, I think the dragon thing is the fascinating, because however they go with this, they're inventing some new bit of dragon lore.
Sure. Which they can do. I mean, fine, whatever.
Which absolutely they can. And this is the thing which makes me like the theory. There are a huge amount of practical issues they will have to work their way through, because obviously some people would recognize him. You can go so far. I mean, the fake moustache, okay, fine, but
yeah, people are going to recognize Laenor.
Yeah, he shaved his hair off. He dresses different. Maybe he puts on a weird accent. I don't know. You can go so far, but there will be some people who would definitely recognize him. Adam Velaryon, though, doesn't survive that long.
No, Alan does.
Alan does. I mean, the question is, I mean, could this be Carl Curry coming back, which is why he doesn't ride a dragon? But that for me is perhaps a little tinfoil too far. But the idea that he does come back sort of in secret, and they kind of change it so that he's there and people don't actually see him much. He just sort of flies in on a dragon sometimes and does stuff and then sort of goes away. That I think they could pull it off if they wanted to, but that doesn't mean they should.
Maybe if he gets like disfigured or something, maybe he goes like to the Stepstones, or he fights in the Disputed Lands, he gets a big scar on his face like Sandor Clegane, and nobody knows it's him anymore. Like, I guess that could work, or something like that.
Absolutely. But I think it would obviously have to be, these are Corlys's bastard children, or they're pretending to be, rather than these are Laenor's, because that definitely wouldn't work.
I don't know about you, that part's never sat right with me. It's like, Corlys? Like, nobody's more in love with their wife than Rhaenys. It always is kind of like, it makes sense that they have to be his.
Hmm.
Otherwise, like, why do it? But then it's like, how much are we going to learn a lot more about Corlys? Like, is he maybe not as devoted to Rhaenys as much as he's devoted to the idea of Rhaenys or something like that? I don't really know. Like, I also couldn't believe that Stephen Toussaint's uh, Corlys would screw around on Rhaenys like 15 years ago. That seems crazy to me.
It does. I mean, although they seem to have quite a pragmatic relationship. They
Mm,
sort of a couple of times they've sort of sat there and just sort of talked to each other, and they've clearly had different views on something, and they've just sort of worked out how
yeah.
we're going to go forward with this. So maybe, I don't know. And he certainly seems to, it was a kind of a throwaway line in the last episode, but and he's gone off for 6 years, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. I mean, has he not come back at all in 6 years? That
No,
seems quite.
been gone.
If he's in a loving relationship and the stepstones are, they're relatively close, so I don't know. There are elements there, but Mara Lee's asked a question um, about this, which I think adds another element, which says, do you think that, hi Mara, by the way, do you think that Daemon and Rhaenyra will finally tell Corlys about, and his wife, the truth about what happened to Laenor? Because one of the big issues here, obviously, is that Rhaenys has to be on Team Black in
Hmm.
the books. But they've really played up on the show the fact that she thinks that Rhaenyra and Daemon killed her son.
Right.
Um, now, are they going to come clean on that? Are they going to, and if so, would that open the door to him perhaps someday returning? What do you think on that? Do you think it's a possibility they might just sort of be open about it now they're at war?
Huh. It's a good question. Also, one thing real quickly in your chat, Randall Kildare, is Joe Magician a Mutant League football fan? Yes, I am. That's where my name comes from. It's from an old Sega Genesis game. But also, one thing I wondered about during my stream with San Rixian last week, and it's sort of been on my mind, the whole thing where you're talking about how Corley's disappeared for 6 years.
Hmm.
Has he actually been in the Stepstones for 6 years, or has he been down there fighting and then also trying to find Carl Corey at the same time? Like, because that's where they were supposed to go, right? That's where Laenor
Yeah.
and Carl were going to go. They're going to go fight in the Stepstones. That was their whole plan. They were running away together. So I'm wondering if Corlys has been hunting using his pirate skills, trying to find where this guy went. I think it'd be fascinating if he tries to find Carl and then accidentally finds Laenor alive. And that's kind of what he's been doing this whole time. Um, as for what he will think, if they ever tell them the truth, maybe in some like, I don't know, because what would it do in order to tell them? Like Rhaenyra, it would just expose her as a liar to Rhaenys. You know, I guess that like the oh no, well, she did have a hand. It's like the same thing with Alison, where it was like what she didn't exactly lie about what she did that night when she went out in
Mhm.
King's Landing, but she's not telling the whole truth, and it's like this sort of thing that's just probably going to piss off Rhaenys. I'm not sure about Corlys. He kind of already has what he wants out of the relationship anyway. He has grandkids that are going to be royals. I'm not really sure. I think we're gonna have to see a lot more from Corlys. Obviously he's gonna come back and, um, well, I guess this is kind of it's not really a show spoiler. It's a book spoiler. Like he's not dead.
Yeah.
He's gonna continue doing stuff. Um, I don't know. I don't. There'd have to be a reason to tell them. I don't really know what it could be. Because at this point, Rhaenyra and Daemon are relying on the fact that they're kind of savages for their reputation. That's like that was Rhaenyra's whole thing, and Daemon's whole thing. It's like you have to be feared. We can't let anybody figure out you didn't do this. We need the reputation to work. And Rhaenys is already um, gone completely over anyway. She's like, all right, fine, I agree to the marriage. We're good. Like even if you did kill my son, I'm on your side because we're going forward with this stuff. Like I'm all in. So there's not really a lot to be gained from telling them unless there's like some sort of very personal moment where it means something. I don't really know.
Well, this is where the time contraction, because there have
Yeah.
been time contractions here, does play into this, because in the book, then what happened with Vaemond Corlys being injured and Vaemond, I mean, he wasn't like the main guy there. It was he's a sort of a random cousin.
Yeah.
But that happened a little bit before this. It wasn't just like the evening before Viserys died. And this means that in the book, we get Corlys, who is on the Black Council, effectively. He's there as Team Black from the get-go. Whereas here, they will have to bring people back together in some way. There has to be something which brings them back, because otherwise there is, I mean, there has to, at the very least, be a conversation between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys. And Rhaenyra says, "Well, thanks for not not going against me and all the rest of it." And then Rhaenys will go, "Yeah, but I still hate you for killing my son." And then Rhaenyra goes, "Oh, that's fair enough." Or maybe she goes, "Well, actually," so there has to be a conversation somewhere along the way that brings people together. Exactly how they frame it could go anywhere. But as we're talking about Corlys, Marley's other question was about how he will feel about the murder of his brother. Will he want revenge? Because, as I say, in the book, this was a sort of a cousin, and there are a few others there who got their tongues cut out by Viserys. It all gets quite gruesome. But they've made this relationship a lot closer. Vaemond is the brother, and he was standing up for House Velaryon in a way. So how will Corlys react? I mean, it's a tough one. What do you think? Assuming, I don't know whether it'll happen this season or maybe at the beginning of next season, but he will find out what happened, and he has to end up on Team Black. How do you think that works? Is he going to be angry with Daemon for chopping his brother's head, half of his brother's head off,
leaving his tongue? Yeah.
What do you think is going to go on there?
This is another tough one, because he clearly, in the last time we saw him, Corlys had that big conversation with Rhaenys, and he was basically like, the only thing that matters is the name. Like, they effectively broke up. He's been gone for 6 years at this point. He made the argument that the name Velaryon being on the Iron Throne is more important than the losses of their children. That's basically what their argument broke down to. He's like, legacy is more important than our feelings. So I think in that sense, he's going to be, I'm sure he's going to be conflicted on somewhat. He's not a monster. He's not a psychopath. He clearly does feel something about the death of his children, and he probably will about his brother. But his mindset, how all along, has been, well, it sucks that Vaemond died, and maybe I'm going to be annoyed at Daemon for doing that. But also, we got what we wanted. Well, I got what I wanted. My kids will continue to, my grandsons will carry on the Velaryon name to Driftmark and the Iron Throne and beyond. If he changes, it would have to be basically that he has changed significantly in the last 6 years for him to value Vaemond more than those ideas, I guess.
So at a very high level, Corlys keeps up the same attitude he's had, which is, what I want is my grandkids, or what the history books will recognize as my grandkids, on the Iron Throne. And Rhaenys will have to be in the same kind of like, I'm here sticking by my husband, which he has in public all the way through. And also perhaps thinking, you know what, Rhaenyra should be queen, because she was the king said that she is her heir, and so maybe she will come around to that perspective that she said she was at peace with the fact that she didn't become queen, but maybe she is willing, as a last fight, to kind of like step up to help out Rhaenyra. It's there's a lot unpack there, it has to be said. Just very quickly, Andrew Shapiro, thank you very much. Very generous donation from you there. About halfway through the live stream, we're up to $6,100. Thank you so much, everyone who has been donating. Apologies, the chat goes through very quickly, so I can't shout out everyone who's donated, but thank you. If you have, I hugely appreciate it. This is the way I would love you to show your appreciation. If you're enjoying the live stream, you're enjoying the show, there is a donate button somewhere. This is an aid of Alzheimer's care and research, which is a really important cause. A couple of other things, just as we're sort of an hour or so in. I've changed the lighting since my last live stream. Could you just let me know in the chat whether or not I thought I was a bit ghostly before, and a few other people have said so. I think I'm now slightly better, but let me know if that works for you. And patrons, thank you very much. I cannot do what I do without your support. So this is my way of saying thank you. Framing these live stream discussions around your questions. If you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There's a link down in the description. Okay, parish notice is over. Let's move on to
parish notices. You're so British, Robert.
I'm so British. I love that phrase, parish notices. Let's go to a question from George R. R. Tolkien. I started out with his Lara Strong thing, but the second half of this was about the possibility of having the Rhaenira birth scene coming up, which, for those who don't know, when in the book this is, when Rhaenira gets the news that there's been a coup, she's actually mid-childbirth, and that is probably one of the most traumatic childbirths that we have. I personally, I have no information on this, but I cannot see how, given they have focused on childbirth so much on this show, I cannot see how they could resist having that as another scene to sort of bookend the season in some way. Have you got any kind of thoughts on how that might work?
It's hard to do it with hard to do it without spoilers. But yeah, if you guys didn't realize it from the last episode that she is pregnant with another child, that was the whole thing about Daemon putting his hand on her stomach. Her third kid with him is coming. It just sort of ends up being, at least in the books, like a calamity of accidents, that everything kind of conspires to make sure that Rhaenyra cannot respond at all to the Green Council and the theft of her throne, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm not sure how they're going to play it up, because they already sort of did the childbirth fake out with Rhaenyra with the bad one. Are they really going to do another, and they've done the thing with Laena too. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be rough to watch if they try again to go back to the same well for the fourth time. I mean, they have to. It's what happens.
Think they have to, and I think the way that they've broadly done this is Emma Arryn is episode 1, so that's sort of the beginning of the season. Then in the middle of the season, they showed us a childbirth. They didn't really even have to with Rhaenyra. That was after the big time jump. They brought her in. So that was that's the halfway through, and then it kind of makes sense for the last episode to be having that. I don't know. As I say, I haven't got, but that seems to be a sort of a balance to, and they seem to have thought about the structure of the season quite a lot. So I think that would be my best guess. Thank you very much for anyone in the chat who's been saying that I'm looking a lot more alive than I was in previous live streams, because a lot more warmth, less washed out, less like a ghost. But also my sparkly hair has made more of a return, apparently. So
your green screen?
The green screen. Well, I'll see whether I can work on that one for next time. Just a little bit of a tweaking, but I quite like the sparkly hair. It works for me. Anyway, let's go with a question from Shar saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're fine." I am. Thank you very much. I really liked the last episode. In the discussion of the changes the show has made to the original, I increasingly feel myself reminded of how visitors to a Greek tragedy must have felt. As the old Greek tragedy by convention only used known tragic material, all the visitors already knew the end and were in the theatre to watch the ride. I think I would agree with that completely. I think this has worked very well. Anyway, what changed Rhaenys' mind so that she supported Lucerys and by extension Rhaenyra? So we're sort of rounding off this bit about sort of Rhaenys and Corlys and the Velaryons. She was very strongly, or not strongly, but she was pushing Rhaenyra away, certainly, again, in front of the Weirwood tree, and then seemed to change her mind when put on the spot by Viserys. In my breakdown of the episode, I thought that there was a good echo, perhaps, or sort of a callback to the fact that where we started this whole season, this was Viserys was made king and she was denied being made queen, and then here he's sort of giving her the authority. He said the only person who can decide whether Corlys changed his mind is her, and but he sort of gave her the authority to say whether or not Rhaenyra's children were bastards, which would have a knock-on effect as to whether Rhaenyra would be queen. So I thought there was quite a good echo there. But in terms of her as a person, why do you think she made that judgment call?
This is one of those times where I wish it was. If this is one of those times I wish Fire and Blood was a POV focused thing, because I would have loved to see inside of her head as she was making this decision, as they do in the main books. So I think part of it definitely has to do with what you were talking about, that she felt recognized, that she was able to make the choice for Rhaenyra that the Great Council wouldn't make for her. Probably did really figure into her emotional decision making in the moment, that she was like, finally, I can correct the wrong that was done to me. She keeps saying, that I didn't really want it. I'm over it. It's done. It's past. Corlys let it go. But you can always sort of tell that she hasn't let it go. That her talks to Rhaenyra about like how there will be a war coming and how there's nothing you can do against the patriarchy. Viserys basically, as you said, it's up to you, Rhaenys. You get to decide the future of this house. I think she also felt very inspired about seeing Viserys getting up and walking and going up to the Iron Throne, and the Daemon with the picking up the crown and putting it on its head and stuff like that. That she saw that as a great sacrifice that Viserys was willing to make for Rhaenyra and the kids. And I think for Rhaenys, what she had said to Rhaenyra was more that I can't put myself through this, that I can't risk Driftmark for your cause. And this was much more I will pick a side, and just like Viserys did, I will put myself and everything I have at risk, because if my cousin can do it, then I can too. That kind of thing. Because she was sort of ambivalent about the whole thing, where she was like, I guess I'm going to lose Driftmark. That kind of blows, but the High Towers are going to win. And it was sort of like the fight being ignited back in her soul that had kind of gone out for quite a long time. That was sort of the conversation that they keep having. Corlys and Rhaenys is like, I still want to fight. And Rhaenys is like, no. But I never really got the sense that she was being totally truthful when she said that. I think she just wanted to temper Corlys' ambition, not that she still didn't think that the realm should change, that she should be the one to do it.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that the presence of Viserys is absolutely vital here. There was that fantastic scene, I can't remember exactly which episode it was, but when Viserys comes to Driftmark and he's going there to see Corlys, and then she bursts into the room and it's like, cousin! Yeah. And it's I thought that really hit me, because this is a thing I'd never really thought about. What would be the relationship between those two people? And it was very clear that she actually cared about him. She liked him. She loved him. He was a part of the family. And it will have affected her hugely to see Viserys like that. And so when he then gave her, when this was his last hurrah, his chance, when he was there saying, I'm sitting on the throne now, I'm doing this, I've got the power, but actually I'm giving you the power. I think that was an incredibly powerful moment for her to be doing it. And I think that they underplayed this, but I think it was a really important scene, was when she's there and she's looking over the body of Aemond, and it's just like, she gets told, you don't have to be here, they're just doing that. And it was just, she didn't say, but it was I'm an honor guard. That was the feeling I got. I'm just standing here. This guy died because of what I said, and he was in the right in one way of looking at it. He was telling the truth at the very least. So, and he is my husband's brother, so I am going to be an honor guard over him. And I think that was a really telling moment about her character, that she may have made a decision, but she's owning the decision. She's saying, okay, because of my decision, this person died, therefore I'm going to stand guard over him. Go on.
Also, to add on to that, she was one of the first characters in the show that said the war was coming. So she knows exactly what she did by siding with Rhaenyra in that moment. She's aware war is coming, and that she's sort of living with the consequences of it, which is a thing she had avoided her whole life, because Corlys would have gone to war for her at the Great Council. That was one of the underlying facts of it, is that we heard that Daemon was trying to raise an army because it was assumed this was going to end up being a conflict, and it was only out of Rhaenys' grace, basically grace and defeat, that they decided not to do it. But she's kind of going like, you know what? No, I'm in. Also, very much so, if you guys go back and watch the episode, if you look at Eve Best's face when Viserys recognizes her, it's very much the idea that Viserys later talks about, that he was trying to put everything in order. That was his attempt to heal the wound. She very much recognizes it too, because she's so smart. She's like, that was the kindest thing you ever done to me, Viserys.
Yeah, I love that point. That's really good. Okay, let's move on from that one. And let's go on to another thing that I know you will definitely have lots to talk about, which is Helaena. Shar was saying, what was it that Helaena mumbled quietly at dinner just before one of the speeches? Well, I'll give the sort of the background on this, and then if you give us your best tinfoil on what's going on with Helaena, I would hugely appreciate that. So Helaena in the book, she comes across as quite a lovable character, quite innocent. People do look down on her quite a lot, but there isn't really that much of a hint of what there seems to be on the show, which is that she is a dreamer, a Targaryen dreamer. And I've counted 4, there may have been more, but I've counted 4 different times when she's done something or said something that looks like it might be prophetic in some way. First of all, we had when we've got Aemond, she's muttering about he'll have to close an eye in order to get a dragon, which obviously then we know that he did lose an eye. We get at the funeral, she keeps on talking about the hand weaving the loom black and green and things like that. So that seems to be prefiguring what's going on in the Dance of the Dragons. What she was muttering at that dinner was beware the beast under the boards, which
beneath the boards,
we'll come to in just one moment. And also the other thing, which it wasn't what she said, but it was very noticeable to me, is that when the music starts, she's the first of the Targaryens to dance. And on the eve of the Dance of the Dragons, for her to be dancing like that, I think that it was a visual bit of prophecy as much as anything else. But why don't you? Well, first of all, what's your take on that one about the beast beneath the board? What's that about, and what's your sort of bigger take on her as a character and as a dragon dreamer?
Okay, so beware. Fun fact, by the way, every single one of us that gets the screeners from HBO lost our minds at that, because there's no closed captions. So every single one of us was like rewinding over and over again, like, what the hell did she just say? I had numerous conversations with people, like going back and forth, like, did you catch that? Hang on, I'm going back. I got to find this. But where the beneath
And
Where the
also,
beast?
just sorry,
Yeah,
just to interrupt, the other thing that happens so many times, and I know this comes across as a kind of a poor me. So, I mean, I got an early view of the episode, but I couldn't understand every word. But it was like Viserys's last words. For the
yeah,
life of
nothing.
me,
I
I
had
could not
nothing.
make out. I had no idea. So,
I heard
um,
my
uh,
love, and then what he said before that, it was no more. I didn't get that till I saw the closed
exactly.
captions.
So
Um,
anyway, but carry on, Helena.
yeah, fun stuff. So the thing that they did is in the first few examples is they made them easy. That they are presenting her as a puzzle for you to solve. So the easy one is obviously he'll have to close an eye, gets Vagar. Okay, so they're establishing the pattern. Clue, answer. Next one, they do the hand turns the loom. Very easy to understand what she's talking about. It's the dance of the dragons. They're weaving banners. They're weaving dragons of cloth. That means war banners, that kind of thing. Easy. So we get two easy examples, and we get a hard one. And I think that's a fun thing that they're doing. It's almost like something you'd see in school, where it's like they're demonstrating the concept and then they're challenging you. So there's a lot of theory crafting about what she's talking about because this one is really hard to understand. So, book spoilers, the number one answer I've heard is that it means blood and cheese. That this is talking about the beast beneath the boards is referring to the rat catcher and the supposed member of the gold cloaks that are going to come and kill her children, basically. Um, I've also heard it linked to Lair Strong, where that people have been going off of my the three-eyed rat thing, and been saying that he's the beast beneath the boards, and that he's going to be the one that ends up going through with it. I think that makes sense, but also there is kind of I want to pump the brakes on it because everything she's said this entire series, everyone has said, "Oh, this is about blood and cheese," and it's like, no, the first two had nothing to do with it. So it's like it's okay for her not to be talking about blood and cheese every time she says something prophetic. She might be, she very well might be, but it's good to think outside the box. Um, Another one, I was chatting with Joanna Robinson about it, and she came up with a really good one that it might be about Jace's death. That the at the Battle of the Gullet, the beast beneath the boards is a scorpion, the same thing that they used to shoot down the dragons in season 7 and 8. Because a scorpion, a beast, makes sense because it was in a boat. They fired it at him. That's how Jace ends up dying with Vermax. That would make a good amount of sense. It would also the boards of the ship. That was the thing that got a lot of people. It's like, what does boards mean here? Because like all the all the floors in the Red Keep are stone, but I guess there are some wood beneath it. It's like people were talking about the construction of medieval castles. It hurt my brain. Um, there was another good one. Where the beast? Oh, obviously, Lucerys's death. That beneath the boards refers to Storm's End. That the beast beneath it is Aemond, and that's I thought that one also fit quite well because they haven't been setting these up. The time jumps are significant, but not the 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 relationship has been episode A prophecy made, episode B paid off, and that's what they've done the first two. So it would make sense if relatively quickly we see the that prophecy paid off. If we're talking about blood and cheese, or even if it's Vermax and Jace, that's going to be quite a ways down the line. So I think if you're talking about like how soon it will happen, Lucerys and his death with Aemon would make the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in blood and cheese camp on this one. I think
Yep.
that it works best, and I can almost imagine how they could set that up.
Hmm.
So we're talking slightly vaguely, and I've found this with absolutely everyone who's read the books. Even though I say book spoilers are fine, I think book readers say this is such an epic scene. We don't want to say too much about it.
Yeah, I'm
But
trying.
I could certainly imagine a situation where you could sort of hear a floorboarded room, and then there you can hear some scuffling underneath the
Sure.
floorboards, and it's like that would certainly work. And it's like, what's that? Oh, don't worry about it, it's nothing. No, there's something beneath the boards. That kind of
Hmm.
thing would work really well for that. So that's my kind of take. But as a dragon dreamer more broadly, this does add on a whole extra dimension, because she's not just a dragon dreamer, she's like a Cassandra figure that
Hmm.
everybody's ignoring.
Right.
They're not paying any attention to any of this. And it does make you wonder whether at some point someone will. Um, and who that somebody might be. I mean, I know we could circle around to Laris quite quickly here, but and your eyes gleam at just the idea. But are they really going to leave the character as just muttering stuff under her breath and nobody hears it, and that's just for us, the audience?
Sure.
Or is it actually going to be a plot point? Because at the moment, it's not a plot point. At the moment, it is just a little fun Easter egg for us, the audience, and for the people who've read the book go, oh, I know what that's referring to. But the majority of the people who watch the show probably don't. They don't pick up on it. Mm-hmm. So it does make me think that maybe they will, at some point, maybe next season, have somebody take this seriously, and then where might that lead? I don't know. I haven't followed that train of thought down, but it makes sense to me. You could just having somebody muttering fun things for all the fans isn't really where this.
Oh, you mean Patchface? Nobody likes Patchface.
Well, but he wasn't on the show.
I know. There's a reason he got cut.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's why. I mean. Anyway, I don't know. So that's my take, is that at some point we may do that. Shasha's other question here is also a really interesting one, saying, will there be any redeeming scenes for Alison's sons? Alison seems to have found her harshness on a misunderstanding and some necessity, and Rhaenyra's sons seem decent and just constantly provoked and quick to anger. But both of Alison's sons seem decadent and rotten to the core. Yeah. Look at him. So
I was wondering where you're going, Robert. What's going on?
I know, just like
I forgot you had Aemon right behind you. Yeah,
he's just like lurking behind me. But I think this is interesting because Aegon does not come across well on the show or the book, to be fair.
Nope.
And if anything, he just gets worse in the book because he's then becomes a whole lot more broken. And Aemond also does seem to get a bit worse in the book as well, because it's like then he's suddenly free once Aegon sort of more of a backseat, and he's there riding this huge dragon. He can do whatever he wants, and he seems to just lose all kind of inhibitions. So are they going to just keep these characters as they're not one-dimensional, but they are clearly baddies? Can you see that there's going to be some redemption for either of them somewhere?
So just quickly, people in the chat said what I said about who will recognize her abilities. I think it's definitely going to be Aemond, if anybody does. His relationship to Alice Rivers definitely seems to point to the idea that they're probably going to pay up his interest in sort of the magical and the weird, considering that's where he goes. So it makes sense and he also has a lot of respect for Helaena, much more than Aegon does. So that would be my bet. But as to, are they going to get any better? No, Aegon is, every time they put him on screen, he's doing something worse. They're continuing to escalate just how bad a person he is. And it's actually kind of shocking how hard they're putting down the foot on the gas on that one, because they've gone the other way with a lot of the other characters, but they're like, no. Aegon is as bad as you thought. In fact, he's even worse. Which is, Aemon, though, they've put a lot of work into giving him sort of the Alison treatment. Like, obviously, we know what he does and the horrible things he gets up to, but you can see for him that it's coming from a place of a sense of duty to his family. He's very much, I've heard comparisons to him and Euron, and I think those are well made, but also a lot of Stannis in him, where, like, when he was talking about Helaena, and he's like, I would marry her for to strengthen the house, and it's my duty to do so. He's clearly been in the training yard every single day, learning to be a good fighter. He's like trying to do what he's supposed to. And he kind of resents the idea that Aegon is kind of being the shithead that he is with no consequences. And you can sort of see that relationship they're playing up. I think we're going to find out more and more that Aemond is a bad person with sympathetic goals, reasons for doing it, but I don't think so with Aegon. There's almost nothing that they could do to bring him back from where they've gone so far. I mean, they had him in the last episode rape a woman, and then had Helaena insinuate that he does the same to her. It's like, where are you coming back from that?
Yeah, I think I would agree. Definitely, Aegon is not going to be a sympathetic character, and I think he's going to get worse. Aemond, I do like this idea. Thank you for picking that up in the chat. He is the one? Aemond is the one who is most likely, I think, to be picking up on Helena. There was a scene back in that episode on Driftmark when he's talking with Aegon, and basically, he's just there being quite sympathetic and thinking, I mean, he's not
kind of
to her.
Better than Aegon.
Well, better than Aegon, yeah. So it's. I mean, he's not being a good guy, but it would make sense then if it's like if he starts thinking, well, what she's saying is actually going to mean something. Maybe it's like a go to Harrenhal. That's where you're going to get your crowning glory. Or I don't know, whatever it is that could actually start to lead him to be taking some of the actions that he takes, because otherwise we get. I mean, moving forward, there are some big tactical and strategic decisions that Team Green make that you go, okay, I kind of understand it, but at the same time, I don't. and so if they come up with a big reason for why they suddenly will charge out of King's Landing like that is not just you've got a couple of hotheads in charge, then I think that would be really quite good. And maybe Helena was going to be part of that.
Hopefully. I would like them to use Helena more. I don't want her to be what she is in the books, which is a series of tragedies. It'd be better. Well, okay, it's going to hurt a lot more because that's still definitely going to happen. But I would like it a lot more if they continue to develop her as a character. Even though it will definitely hurt way worse as they do that. Like we watch House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones and read A Song of Ice and Fire for the pain. Bring it on.
Yeah. There's a lot of pain in the Song of Ice and Fire and Blood. Whitney saying, hi, Robert and Matt. Just want to say I love both of your channels so much and find your voices to both be soothing. I can listen to them and do house chores or a long drive, and they become more bearable. Well, thank you very much.
So many people say that.
Well,
I fold my laundry. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah, I take it as a compliment. I definitely do. I mean, the biggest thing that people say to me is that I fall asleep to you, which I always think everyone says, don't, it's not an insult. I say, okay, I'm not going to take it as an insult. But anyway, that's by the by. Whitney saying, do you think we will get a dragon altercation this season? I'm not sure how the pacing at this point will allow for much of what I want to see happening. What are your thoughts? Well, just in terms of pacing, the big time jumps have now happened. So just to be clear, we're not going to be having... So the actors we've got are the actors we're going to have moving forward. We're not going to have any big jumps. Everything for the next 3 seasons or whatever we have is 18 months, something along those lines. So that's what the pacing is, and it's going to be quite fast. So I think I've been asked this on most of my live streams so far, and the closer we get to the end of the season, the easier this is to sort of pick out that where is this season going to end. I think the answer to your direct question is, will we see a dragon altercation? Yes, I think we will. But Matt, what's your take in terms of where you think we will end this season? It's starting to narrow down now. My take is Blood and Cheese next season, and we'll have the fight over Shipbreaker Bay at the end of this season. Is that your take as well?
So one thing to keep in mind is that nobody's knows what's going to happen in episode 10. Screeners are not going out, so we don't know. We won't know until the episode goes live. But I've thought since before the season that I think the battle over Shipbreaker Bay is the obvious place to end the season, because it's sort of the point of no return. It's the point at which it has gone from a cold war to a hot war, more or less. And like, there's actually there's going to be people that die in the run up, and there's going to be small scuffles and stuff like that. But when the princes start battling and they start fighting, like, that one, it's hard to come back to, because then everyone starts counterpunching each other, which is more or less what happens in the books. It's can I spoil slightly what this is, what we're talking about?
In the book, you can say what happens in the books, because we don't know whether it's 100% going to happen like that in the show. So probably, roughly, but not 100%.
What we're talking about in the books is Lucerys and Aemond. They get into a fight at Storm's End, and there ends up being a dragon battle over Shipbreaker Bay and ends up with Lucerys dying. So yes, if that's where they're ending the season, then we will definitely get one dragon battle. But next season, there's going to be an insane amount of dragon battles. Like it goes
Yeah.
through the roof, and probably the coolest ones we've ever seen. And it won't be like we saw during season 8, where it's like random dragons flying each other in the clouds. You couldn't see everything. It's going to be intense. What we're going to see.
It will, and I cannot wait. I genuinely cannot wait. This is the thing. I can remember how excited I was. Season 8. We're not going to get into a discussion about season 8 again, but there was that moment in the really dark episode when you had the dragon battle, and that it only lasted, I don't know, a minute or so, but that was so cool. I loved that so much, and we will see more of that in daylight. And not just necessarily with 2 or 3 dragons, but even more on occasion. This is going to be really quite epic. But yeah, in terms of the end point of this season, I don't know. None of us know, but my best guess is that we will have that fight. And then I still, like I've said this probably since the first episode, I think we'll end up with some equivalent of Daemon and Rhaenyra. They're going, right, so this is war or something, and then glowering over Blackwater Bay. The moment that we know that that's civil war, that's what's there's no turning back now. That's the moment that we're going to end it on. And then if they go in for a cold open with blood and cheese for season 2, that would be just astonishing.
There's also an important line that they showed off early in the teasers that hasn't happened yet between Daemon and Rhaenyra, and it's the line from Daemon about dreams didn't make us kings, dragons did. So that should still come up, and I imagine that will be Rhaenyra talking to Daemon about the dragon, the Aegon the Conqueror's dream. Like Viserys told Emma about his dreams. Rhaenyra, I imagine that's going to be a part of this thing, that she's going to justify that they have to go to total war because it's not just her inheritance, it's the fate of the world. And you can imagine Daemon being like, what? What are you talking about? And there being sort of an argument, but that ending up being one of the things that both sides feel they are justified by the weight of Aegon's prophecy.
Yes, although Alison doesn't know that this is Aegon's prophecy.
No, she doesn't, but she's still clearly hanging on the one that she thinks Viserys had.
Exactly. So, and the other kind of thing we have to say there, I mean, I don't want to let too much air out of your balloon here, but sometimes lines in trailers are not in the show. They've recorded them specifically to
I think they've all showed up, haven't they?
Well, so far they have, but sometimes they do. I mean, so I think you're right that this probably is what's going to happen. I think definitely we're going to get Rhaenyra telling Jace, telling her heir.
Definitely that.
And that's going to be just before he heads up to Winterfell, which is going to lead to a whole load of other things that maybe we can talk about some other time. But if he arrives freshly in Winterfell with all this talk about this threat from the north and long winters,
it makes sense.
And things like that, it would make
it all links together nicely.
Exactly. So we get that, but yeah, I think the ending of this season is the decision. This is now war. I've got a new member, Simo Sups. Welcome to the channel, being a channel member. Thank you very much. And let's go to a question from. Where should we go? Alejandro Martinez saying, hello, Robert. I wonder if Viserys' support of Rhaenyra as heir went beyond just ensuring her claim, but to actually making sure that a succession for Jace, Luke, or Joff is secured. Viserys was a dreamer. What if, in his dreams, it turned out that the Targaryen defeating the threat from ice had dark hair, like his 3 grandchildren? The Strongs are first men like the Starks, both have dark hair, right? This could work not only for show canon, Arya defeating the Night King, but possibly book canon if Jon ends up being instrumental in defeating the others. Yes, this is a little bit tinfoily, but added a somewhat deeper layer to Viserys' decision. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you lap up, obviously, but my sort of downbeat take on this. I love the thinking, is that Viserys, I don't think Viserys, yes, he was a dreamer, but we only heard about the dream or dreams that Aegon had, and then he had that one
Right.
about um, about his son being crowned and the splintered shields, things like that. Um, so whether or not he sees his son as having dark hair, and or whether another part of this prophecy that's come down from Aegon was, oh, yes, this has to be pure Targaryens, however, asterisk, they've got dark hair. I don't know. How do you think this holds up? Do you think he might have seen a dark-haired person?
I think if he did, it would have influenced his decision when Aegon came out with platinum blonde hair. Like, I don't think he would have been as conflicted if he's like, oh, well, that wasn't the same kid, obviously. Look, their hair's different. Like, I don't think that he probably saw a dark-haired Targaryen with the Aegon's Iron Crown. Also, Jon never wears Aegon's crown, so that would be kind of a weird one. But then again, dragon dreams are so symbolic and so weird that my absolute favorite one is from the Mystery Night when John the Fiddler or Damon the Second is like, oh, well, you see, I saw an egg hatching and a dragon coming out. So he's like, well, this egg's going to hatch. And then Balerion's like, it's actually Aegon. And he's because he's called an egg and he sort of became sort of like a king. So he was hatching and became a dragon. It's like when you're working with that level of BS from George, I don't think that any sort of like anything's really off the table. But I would guess that he is not dreaming of Jon. I would guess that he actually was dreaming of Aegon, and it's directly about the dance. That's what his dream was. He just didn't know what it was.
I think that's fair. I am still holding it just on that technicality there in Duncan Egg. I'm still holding out the possibility that we may see a dragon get hatched randomly at somewhere like Summerhall, but does not survive. Which would
that was bullshit, Robert. You know that was bullshit. That was the biggest trick I've ever seen from George to pull that.
But I think there's clearly something big happens at Summerhall, and maybe somebody sees. I mean, somebody has to have some kind of vision about it.
Sure.
And it's a matter of who has that vision. Mara Lee's asking about Lady Miseria. Whose side is she on, and whose side is she going to be on in the future? This is one of the characters that I have appreciated a lot what they've done, because in the book it seems pretty clear that she was Daemon's lover, and then she was working for Daemon, and then she got a bit jealous and probably turned sides at the very end, and that seems to be her story. Here it seems a lot more complex, that she now seems to have set herself up on her own, because Daemon, going off to the Stepstones for a few years seems to be, how Targaryen and Velaryon men show their lack of love, perhaps. I don't know. But he goes off, Daemon heads off to the Stepstones. She sets herself up in King's Landing, now has this spy network. Who's she working for? Well, she's certainly feeding information to Otto, but she's also helping Daemon. So is she just on the lookout for herself now, do you think? Is that what's going on? Or do you think that there is some extra layer there?
So, as he said, Daemon and her relationship, if they're going by the book, fractured a lot earlier than it does. With the, like, when we saw, she basically sold him out to Otto with the whole being seen with Rhaenyra and the brothel thing. Although it's implied that Daemon wanted to be seen, she still did it.
Yeah. So he might have even asked her to.
He might have asked her to. He might have gone to her brothel on purpose. I'm not really sure, because they've really separated the two of them when they were a lot closer. Like, specifically, they cut out the fact that in the book, she actually was pregnant and that they lost a son. And they've made that sort of a weird boast by Daemon to do into the whole thing about him being impotent early on. And I guess that has been fixed with Laena and Rhaenyra at this point. But in terms of which side she's on, I think they're going to play her a lot more like Varys and Littlefinger, where she, again, like the question said, that she's more or less on her own side. She's on the side that will help her live, because that was the point of her monologue to Daemon when they are in Dragonstone, where she was like, "You can't protect me. Nobody can, because I'm not a lord. I'm just one of the small folk. You know, people will hurt me to get to you, so I have to protect myself." So I don't think that she's really going to be super on Daemon's side, in the sense that she knows she can't rely on him.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So her motivation seems to be, I need to be safe. I
Right.
need to be protected. And the implication is that her move to King's Landing and setting herself up in this new business is her taking control of it
Right.
herself and saying, nobody else can do this. I'm looking after myself, which puts her a lot more in the kind of the camp that we had with Laris in the
Right.
book, which is, here's this person, perhaps they're just looking after their own interests, maybe they're kind of shifting from side to side as the wind blows. So yeah, I think we will see her there. The interesting thing for me is that last bit, which happens in the book, and the implication now has to be that it will happen slightly differently, or it will have a very different feel to it, which is that basically she goes up to Rhaenyra and says, "You know, Daemon, and you know that Nettles, oh yeah, sitting in a tree." And then
Yeah.
obviously Rhaenyra's a little bit angry about this and basically orders Nettles killed. And that comes from Mysaria. So the book kind of hinted that she was jealous because she thought that Daemon really all this time loved her, but now she's realizing that he doesn't. But here, maybe there's some other layer going on. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. Maybe she's just suddenly realized that actually Damon hadn't protected her all this time, and maybe
Mm.
she's just going to try and get her own back on him in some way. I don't know. I think we're too far away from it to be able to guess with any real conviction about where that is, but they've clearly set this up to work in a different way.
They also, I want to point this out for people that haven't read the books. All of this is a drastic expansion of her character. Mysaria is fairly minor in Fire and Blood. She just sort of gets a few mentions. You get the hints that she's doing spy master things, and that's kind of it. So the fact that we've actually seen like dialogue from her, and the whole scene with her and Damon, and her role and everything so far, is a big expansion of the character. So what we know from the books, they've clearly signaled they're doing something different with her.
Yes, absolutely, and it's so a more well-rounded character, which is good.
Right. She's she's a person now, rather than just a
Yeah,
plot
yeah, I
device.
know. Right. Gabriel Farrell saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're well." I am, thank you. I don't mean to be hyperbolic, a good word. I'm very wary of heaping too much praise on the show this early, but for the life of me, I cannot think of too many scenes in Game of Thrones that felt as emotionally compelling as the two Viserys moments in Episode 8, walking up to the throne and being helped by Daemon, and watching his family finally united and happy at dinner. What about you? Is there a comparable scene you can think of from Game of Thrones? Really interesting question. I think my answer is no. In terms of the emotional impact, first of all, Paddy Considine, obviously astonishing performance for it. There's something wrong in the world. Game of Thrones didn't have that many, in my view, of those kind of a character focusing in on this one character's journey, leading up to a very emotional sort of endpoint. There was some way we would go, okay, that's a good death scene. Queen of Thorns, for example, was a great death scene. But
Mm.
in terms of the emotional impact of a character, I don't think it was there, which for me tells us that this is a slightly different show. They were clearly wanting this to be very similar in tone to Game of Thrones, but at the same time, the keeping it as a family and emphasizing the relationships between those bits of the family has allowed them to come up with a lot more of a kind of an emotional story than they had in Game of Thrones. I mean, what's your take? Is there an equivalent in Game of Thrones, would you say?
So there were two. I said during my live stream with Sanrixian that this was the second episode of anything related to Game of Thrones that made me cry. And the first one was Aemon's death. I think they were quite clearly playing on everything about that. They took a lot more out of the book version of that in A Feast for Crows, but both of it, like the emotional beats, the idea of a life unfinished, sort of the feeling that you had screwed up, you were trying to make it right in the end, like the idea of Aemon trying to go to Daenerys to help her be the prince that was promised. And also you see here with Viserys doing the same thing with reconfirming to Rhaenyra, yes, you are the prince that was promised. It's through you that will save the world. Like those were this I was actually giving my video this week, but I didn't it was too close to my heart. So I'm going to do that one later after a little bit of time has come in between. Actually, this works with your Alzheimer's care thing. My I said this last time I was on. My grandmother died earlier this year, and she had severe, I don't know if she had Alzheimer's, I think she did, but she had definitely had dementia and memory loss. So all of this was very hard for me to watch. I think the second scene that they really hit hard, and I think was close to the same emotional moment, was, I know people in the chat are about to scream at me, but in season 8, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, with Brienne being knighted, and that whole scene of them sitting around the fire and them just being people with each other. I felt like that was the same kind of pulling the emotional strings that they went for here.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually in the chat, Joseph Richardson said the same thing, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I think, yeah, that's, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, that had the build up over a long period of time. And for a character that you genuinely cared about with Brienne, and for her to actually get the thing that she wanted, but didn't ever think that she would get.
Right.
Yeah, there is some kind of resonance there. Interesting stuff. But yeah, I think it shows the difference in tone in the fact that this came more readily here in House of the Dragon than it did in Game of Thrones. 444 questions saying House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, which I also cover on this channel, did the same scene in their respective episodes 8. A dying king mistaking the person who was beside his bed with his own daughter. What do you think about these two scenes? In the Rings of Power, I can see the result of this scene is another mystery box, but in House of the Dragon, I can see a civil war as a result. Well, I mean, I don't know. I know you're a Tolkien fan. I don't think I've asked you what you thought about the Rings of Power. I shall do that in just one moment.
Okay.
But just in terms of that scene, I think that they were very different resonances, because we didn't have, with King Palantir, I don't want to get too much into the Rings of Power because this is a House of the Dragon stream, but he'd only appeared a couple of times, and the person he was talking to isn't a character that we've hugely bought into yet on a hugely emotional level, and it felt a lot more as this is leading to a point where we want her to be looking at the Palantir, and so something's going to be happening next season with that, rather than what we had on House of the Dragon, which was, this is the culmination of a huge plot line all the way through the show. So that I think it was, although it was the same setup, they were very different kind of what things in order of what they were trying to achieve there. But we won't go too much into the Rings of Power, but as you're here, have you watched it? Did you enjoy it? What's your thoughts?
I have not watched it.
Okay.
We had talked about this a couple of years ago. It's like, oh, I think we should both do Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon, but I decided for my own mental sanity that I could not do two shows at the same time. So the most that I've been engaging with Rings of Power is I've been watching Tim Hickson's, or Hello Future Me's, reviews of each episode. He does a great job. I love his channel, and it's on To the Future. It's his vlog format thing where he's doing House of the Dragon and Rings of Power and stuff like that. So I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
is this from Numenor or something?
No huge spoiler in there, but I can tell you later. But yeah, for those who don't know, Tim Hickson, Hello Future Me, is an excellent channel. I'm sure somebody in the chat will be able to put a link up there. And he's an excellent guy as well, actually. I've chatted to him online a couple of times. But let's move on to a question from Zvibo saying, "Hi, Robert. With last week's wonderful episode, it really feels like House of the Dragon had a proper moment that broke through with the wider public. With Viserys perhaps somewhat unexpectedly having been the heart of the season so far, it feels like we're now in uncharted territory to an extent. Do you think the lack of clear good people to root for will be a problem for the rest of the dance, or will the writers manage to find aspects of the other characters who the public can latch onto to balance out all the drama and awfulness?" This reminds me a bit of there was an article 2-3 weeks ago, I think it was in the Independent, that got circulated a little bit on Twitter, that was trying to make the case that people would care less about House of the Dragon because none of the characters were really the characters that we would love, and therefore we didn't really care who ended up on the Iron Throne, because they were all shades of dark and nasty. I think the viewing figures and the response has shown that to be a lie.
Sure.
I think people have bought into this, and they are excited by it. And I think it also kind of misses the point as well on a kind of slightly more meta level. George R. R. Martin isn't writing an allegory, but it's very clear that there are some themes that come across through his work, and one of them is that the struggle for power in and of itself is a bad thing, and so the fact that the people who are struggling for power are not good people is probably actually reflective of that kind of more meta theme. But what's your take on that? How do you think they will handle the fact? And I think it's true that there aren't any characters that we would hold up like Brienne or Sam or someone like that, a main character that you go, yes, that's a good human. Possible exception of Helena, I guess. But what's your take? How will they drive this forward with so many dark-ish characters?
Well, I mean, we haven't met some of the unambiguously good characters. Clearly, the Blackwoods will be coming up. They're going to be great. We're going to meet more of the Starks. Cregan Stark's going to be a fan favorite. Also, Rhaenyra's sons are unambiguously awesome. I mean, as far as the book is concerned, they're long for this world. But I mean, like, I don't know if anybody watched the last episode and was like, "Man, Jace sucks." Like, no, Jace is just like a good lad. So, and the lads themselves will be coming up and that kind of stuff. But also, like the whole idea is this sort of the basis of that article is such a failure because I don't remember Daenerys's flaws holding back people from talking about her for years on end about how they're her favorite character, nor Jaime Lannister, nor Tyrion. It was the flaws that made people love them. So I don't like even in the books, like Tyrion remains one of the favorite book characters. And you made a very popular video a while back about the real Tyrion. And like, what was it? It was like, why is he stupider or something like that in the show?
Yeah, well, yes, something along there. Why is Tyrion suddenly so unintelligent, or something along those lines?
But it's the same kind of idea. It's like all the characters that you love from the show are worse in the books, and people still love them. So I don't think it's going to make a big difference for the audience. But I think the one thing that will get sort of weary on audiences for House of the Dragon versus Game of Thrones is that Game of Thrones protected their characters a lot more, whereas Fire and Blood is much more a a very quick carousel of good characters jumping on, dying, and then jumping off, and then you just sort of get replaced the whole way through. But there are going to be a few that stick, particularly the Blackwoods. A lot of the northern characters are going to be like that. I think Daron the Daring should be somebody, although, God, again, same sort of carousel thing. I forgot about that. How quickly he shows up and then shuffles off this mortal coil.
I think there's also an element of some characters, and I hope they play this up on the show. It was certainly my reading of the book, was that some characters like Corlys start to, although they start very much as that I'm here for the fight, they start to get weary of the war. And towards the end, they're almost forming an anti-war party.
Right.
That says, like, how on earth do we stop this war carrying on? Quick, let's send out some letters before that crazy northerner arrives and tells us not to. And it's that. So I do wonder whether we might get this group of people who we actually want to cheer on, because the the civil war, is going to be bloody and brutal and horrible, and we, the viewers, should go, yes, this is great TV, but we want it to stop. So those characters, I hope, will be the kind of characters that we can finally root for.
Also, to go back onto the point a little bit, like people hold up Brienne as this awesome character, and she is, but she also exists in a world where Cersei's in power. So, like, the idea that one of the main characters is awful precludes the other ones from being lovable. That's just like a totally false dichotomy. I don't even know where they came up with it. I think it was just to get people like us to talk about it, so they go check out The Independent. Otherwise, it just seems so. It seems like it was written from somebody that has never seen it, I guess.
Yeah.
Show or
Yeah.
books. It's
Exactly.
a crazy thing to write.
Exactly, but people read it, and I guess that was probably the aim. Lady Pushkins, do you think Viserys was poisoned, or just something like narcotizing fasciitis, as we always have conspiratorial thoughts? Well, your medical knowledge is probably greater than my own about narcotizing fasciitis. I'm not 100% sure about, but do you think maybe someone in the chat, if you don't know immediately, someone in the chat, there's always a clever person in the chat who'll be able to tell us about that. Do you think he was poisoned? You did sort of like hint at the possibility a little bit earlier in the live stream that maybe Team Green were trying to get rid of him. I don't get the impression that Paddy Considine was playing the character as if he were being poisoned, and I don't think that they needed to poison him because he was going to die anyway.
Mhm.
But do you think it's possible that that's what happened?
So I think they were trying to say necrotizing fasciitis, which is basically where your skin eats itself, more or less. Patty Considine, I think on Instagram a while back, said it was leprosy. If it was leprosy, then the Maesters had no chance. You don't need to poison him at that point. At that medical knowledge, he was dead anyway. Yeah, it's a flesh-eating bacteria, says Sasuke. So yeah, that's more or less what it is. I think we both made videos about this, like, are they trying to kill Viserys? And I sort of came around on the idea that why? I don't even know why they'd be trying to kill him, because he's their perfect patsy. Like, he doesn't want to go to war. He just kind of wants to sit around and play with his Valyrian sculpture while Otto rules everything. It's like, I didn't understand the motive other than a general, we're trying to kill dragons. But then if you also, like, we're scared of Daemon, but if you're scared of Daemon, then you keep Viserys alive as long as you can to keep him as far from the throne as you can. So it was like the motives didn't work. I thought they were just setting up the Maesters as bad at what they were doing as a plot point. But I am aware the Maester conspiracy is a thing that people love talking about, so you can't just dismiss it out of hand. I think you could read it both ways, but I think the idea that Viserys looked like he was going to die after like episode 5, and then he limped on like another 10 years, probably tells you it was just Melos who sucked at being a healer, because Orwell has clearly been much more successful at keeping him alive despite his intense deterioration.
Yeah, and in terms of the Maester conspiracy, then I'm very much of the view. I did one video right back towards the beginning of the season. I'm very much of buying into this idea that maybe they might have been happy for him to be king in the first place, the king without the dragon. I'm very happy with the idea that they and the High Towers and the Faith of the Seven were perhaps working in tandem to try and move away from the Targaryen rulership. That kind of works. But actually killing him, I don't think it's necessary. I think that, as you say, it works for them just as well, getting their team a little bit older, getting their dragons growing a bit, getting everybody just in place, and then they can go. The key thing was that they're in charge of the timing and the event. But yeah, actually poisoning him, no, I don't think so. So, Lady Pushkins, I apologize for mispronouncing the medical condition you were talking about there. Catherine Furseth set there saying, "Hi, Robert and Matt. I wonder what will happen with Viserys's dagger. Yes, that
Oh.
one going forward. It's been speculated a lot as to how and when Aegon's prophecy was lost, and the fate of the dagger seems to be connected to that. Who will have it going forward, and how did it survive up to the current storyline when clearly the prophecy did not? So I think you've got some thoughts about this dagger, and I will yes, he says. I'll give a little sort of intro to this. So this was clearly Viserys's dagger that he had, and we saw it right at the very end that they were showing us. It was there in his room. So it is with Team Green at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how does it end up not 300 years, 170 odd years later? Yeah, something like that. Years later, still in the possession of the Iron Throne, House Baratheon, technically, by that point. And does it still have the same prophecy written on it? Because, to be clear, in George R. R. Martin's mind, he did that great interview with Aziz Anshay where he clarified it. In his mind, there are now two canons. There's book canon, there's show canon. So if we're just talking show canon, we can talk books in a bit, but if we're just talking show canon, yes, that is the same dagger that does appear all that time later. It does appear to me, maybe some eagle-eyed people will be able to tell me the exact thing, but it does seem to me have been reset perhaps since then. So I do wonder whether at some point within the dance there might be some accident that happens to it. Maybe Aegon carries it around as he's now king, and maybe he has an accident involving dragonfire that might cause it needing to be reset. Who knows? But what's your take? Do you think something will happen to it? Is it the same dagger, or is there a change going on here?
So one of the first, I've been experimenting with YouTube Shorts, and one of the first ones I made was about the dagger when it started showing up because people were trying to figure out if it's the same thing. So they clarified that they didn't like the original prop. They thought it was way too big. Actually, I have the fake one behind me, and awesome. It's almost like a short sword. It's so big, and they decided they wanted to make it a little bit smaller to make it easier to use in scenes. So they shrunk it and they changed the pommel quite a bit, or the hilt.
Okay.
So the explanation they gave at the beginning of the season was that they would, at some point in between now and the future state in Game of Thrones, when Arya gets it and Littlefinger gets it, is that the hilt wears out, so it gets redone by one of the Targaryen kings. It would be interesting if they do it during this season, but not quite sure.
Sorry, just to pause you on that. So to clarify, the in-show reason that the showrunners came up with, or explanation, is it's the same blade.
The metal's the same,
but it's a different hilt, so it should theoretically still have the.
Yes, it will still have the prophecy written in it when Arya shoves it into the Night King's heart.
Okay.
So I think one thing that they're doing with this, and they have been not shy about the fact that they are definitely working with Game of Thrones canon, and I think they're going to try and use this to sort of make it more clear why it was able to do that, because it kind of came out of nowhere that this random Valyrian steel dagger into the Night King's heart could kill him. Like, why is that a thing? And I think that's part of the reason that they've gone with this Aegon writing his prophecy into it. And they've also had it drink king's blood a few times now. They've had Rhaenyra, like, her blood's now on the blade from that. I imagine it will continue coming up, that it will be used in different ways. I think they're going to sort of use it as like the dagger is there's definitely I put a video out the other day, what's today? Yesterday, actually, about this dagger. And I talked about how in the books, it's very clear that blood magic is involved with how you make Valyrian steel, and that it seems to almost like drink blood, and that they seem to be more powerful the more powerful blood you put into it, kind of like Azor Ahai and the Nissa Nissa thing, where it's like the more the person means to you, the stronger the blade becomes. That's why you go from a regular sword to Lightbringer, that kind of thing. So I think they're going to kind of play that up, the idea that 150 years of this dagger being used in weird little scuffles and putting blood on the blade, like Bran's blood is on the blade as well, like and Catelyn's, I believe, from the cat's paw. I
Yeah.
think that's how they're going to try and kind of retcon a bit that whole plot point from Game of Thrones, because it really wasn't explained. There's nothing to kind of say like what's so special about it. So I think that's kind of where they're going with it. But they also added in a bit of weirdness about it. I don't know if you caught this during the episode. Did you notice that when they panned over it, that it made this weird singing sound when it was next to Viserys?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that's what the video is about. It was about the singing dagger. As he's laying in the bed and Alicent walks away, it pans over, and you get the same sound effect from when Jon used Longclaw against the others, and their blades hit each other and made this crazy
Okay.
like singing sound. They reused it while it was just sitting there, and so I think that they're gonna very much try and play up the magical side of Valyrian steel and make it more into um like a soul blade or something that like the blade like the soul like the blade absorbs the souls of those who held it, or the like it drinks blood or something like that, because as we've been talking about a lot during this stream, they're very much pushing fantasy really hard into the show in a way that Game of Thrones didn't. So if you wanted to make an explanation for why this dagger can do it other than it being Lightbringer or something like that, this would be one cool way to do it.
It would, and I really like that actually. And there's probably limited benefit in trying to get inside the showrunners' minds for
Yeah.
Game of Thrones season 8. But the way that they explained it was that this wasn't Arya killing the Night King. This was undoing the magic that created him. And
Right.
it was something
Why?
along the lines of,
Yeah.
and I know, but just to explain the kind of the what they were trying to do there, that the Night King was created in front of a weirwood tree with dragon glass pushed into his heart, and he was uncreated by being in front of a weirwood tree with Valyrian steel plunged into his heart. That was the idea, and it would kind of make sense if that is now show canon, which it is.
Right.
They kind of build up to say, okay, but it's not just any old Valyrian steel.
Like this, yeah, it's special.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so that's to undo what is what has been created.
Improve it. Have it make more sense.
Okay.
I mean, that explanation is fine, I guess, but I think this is one aspect of season 8 and where Game of Thrones went that they are distinctly putting a lot of effort into. Like, this is basically a character in the show at this point. They're trying to basically give it a backstory. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and just to round off that explanation that the showrunners gave, I am pretty sure that this comes not exactly like that, but the genesis of that must have come from that legendary meeting they had with George R. R. Martin, where he says, this isn't a matter of just killing the White Walkers.
Right.
This is a matter of undoing the magic that brought them here in the first place. And so they went, oh, okay, so we need to undo that. And so that's the thought process I think that they went through, which leads us to, obviously, in A Song of Ice and Fire, this is about undoing the magic as well. But that's a complete digression away from House of the Dragon. So
nobody saw that coming.
So let's go to a question from James Horner, saying, hello, Robert and Joe. I hope both of you are doing well. My question is, why is it treason for Rhaenyra to have illegitimate children? As far as I know, in the real world history, the idea of treason in a situation like this comes from another family trying to usurp the royal bloodline. However, in this case, that doesn't apply, as the royal inheritance derives from her, not her husband. I'll quickly answer this one, I think, because I had Mary from the Learned Hands podcast on a couple of weeks ago, and we did discuss this one. And the answer is that no, just the simple fact that she has got bastard children does not delegitimize her. However, some people could interpret the fact that she has been lying about the succession after her as being treason, and as therefore an attempt to subvert the course of the true line of legitimacy. So all of these things are just open to interpretation. We do not have a codified legal system that is as robust in Westeros. We have absolute rule with an absolute monarch, and so the absolute monarch is in charge. So that's what it is, and it's basically you just throw as much mud at somebody as you can, and then try and take power. That's the general rule. So it's not a clear list of these are the things you must have in order to be the heir. Targaryens had succession crises every generation. But the second question I'd love to throw at you, Matt. James Horner says, I'm also really enjoying Graham McTavish as Harold Westerling. We don't see much of him, but he stands out in every scene he is in. I get the sinking feeling he won't make it to the end of the season, though. This I find interesting because Harold Westerling should be dead by this point. And Graham McTavish is a notable actor who has not thus far had much of a role other than just sort of hang around and say, this way, Your Majesty, and things like that. So that implies to me that maybe they have got something up their sleeve for this character. What's your take? What do you think they might be doing with him?
So, yeah, it is a little bit confusing. It's, as you said, Harold Westerling's supposed to be dead by now. Kristen Cole is supposed to be Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. It has been extremely noticeable that they've gotten this great actor who has widely beloved roles in 2 major fantasy series, and they've basically just had him be an extra. I wonder if they're going to essentially Laenor him, that they're going to avert his death for quite a long time.
Is that a verb now?
Yeah, we're gonna Laenor him. Like, maybe he's just gonna join the Blacks at a certain point, and he's just gonna sit on Rhaenyra's council or something like that. You would think. Well, we know we have the Green Council coming soon, and they've been sort of setting up this antagonistic relationship with Kristen, where they've been giving each other glares the last few episodes, and it's like, oh, are they gonna fight? Like, maybe Graham McTavish will die during the Green Council or something like that. But even then, that would be such a waste of his character, unless there's like some big monologue. But like, that's not really. I don't know. It's hard to say. I want him to do more. I would be happy if he survives through to the next season or something like that, and they don't just kill him off. Because why hire him? Why not just do what you did to him, what you did to Ryan Redwine, where it's just like a guy standing behind the throne? He has to be for something, unless there's a massive amount of Graham McTavish footage that's been cut from the show so far. Otherwise, why even do it? It just seems like a bad casting choice. He's too good an actor. He's probably too expensive for what they've had him do so far.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the confusion is. And I would agree he has a lot of gravitas. And so when he's there, you notice him. I do wonder, one thing that they did a couple of times on Game of Thrones was squash a couple of characters together.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder whether they sort of decided to squash his character with Stefan Darklin, pardon me, who is a guy, is in the Kingsguard. He escapes and heads over, as you say, he defects over to Team Black. He takes the crown with him, and then he's effectively the head of the Kingsguard over there. So then we would get this setup between him and Kristen Cole, is that they've then got a rivalry, the 2 heads of the Kingsguard, rival Kingsguards. I don't know, but that would sort of imply that maybe they are keeping him on because they want him to be doing cool things. They don't have a Kingsguard really that they've set up for her. Yeah, Rhaenyra. It wouldn't be Rhaenyra, technically it's Jace, but you know, it's the
Cargyle twins, Black, I guess.
Yeah, so I think that's my best guess. As you say, he is a great actor, and it would be very odd for them to just have him there in the background. They have hired some great. I mean, Bill Patterson, who's Lord Beesbury, is a great actor. Mm-hmm. But he will. Book readers will know he will get a scene. Yes. But it does seem a little odd to hire somebody that high profile within sort of fantasy epic TV show world, and then not do anything with him. So
But also,
interesting question. Yeah.
but also specifically, Beesbury's role is relatively known where it's going. They're breaking Harold Westerling's character drastically to even have him alive this far. So it has to be for some big reason. It's just it's such a strange choice. Why not just kill him? Like as you said, they've done this with a bunch of other characters. They had the um Ryan Core and they had Gavin Spokes, who have both been great, and they had them show up effectively to die very quickly. They've done the same for Melos and a whole bunch of other people. They're changing his character for a reason. They gave him a really robust actor to do it. Gotta be something. Otherwise, it's just a baffling choice. Maybe somebody owes him a favor, and they're like, "We're just going to give you a job, Graham. We're just going to give you you can just stand in the background and collect money or something like that." Otherwise, who knows?
It is, yeah, because also this was a long shoot. This was 10 months. This shoot.
Yeah, he was there the whole time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's for somebody who's as in demand as him. Yeah. Anyway, well, I think we've made our point. There's going to be something with that character coming up. Diego Godoy, I think I answered your question already about Helena's prophecy. Lahiru Dina Lankara, apologies, I probably mispronounced that, saying, "Good evening, Robert and friends. New to Patreon here." Well, welcome to Patreon. My question. Last week, it was so moving to see Viserys' Last Supper and him looking around the table to see all the happy faces. I like to believe the Gentle King passed a happy man. Great performance by Paddy Considine. Also, we saw Vaemon's body being prepared by the Silent Sisters. In the trailer for episode 9, Otto says the door remains shut until we finish our business. How bad do you think it's going to be for poor Viserys' body? Do you think Daemon will find out? So this is something which was in the book noted, the fact that the body started to stink after Viserys died. They were there trying to figure out what to do for a period of time. And his body wasn't particularly cared for. And it actually started to stink out the Red Keep, and everyone was going, what's that smell? There's something terrible, because they were trying to keep this a secret. And they didn't let anyone come in there. I think the question here is that they're clearly squashing everything in quite quickly to get the pace moving up here.
Sure.
So whether they're going to be sort of wishing to emphasize anything to do with Viserys' body, I have a feeling that his body's done. But the Daemon bit of the question, I think, is fascinating, because Daemon, we clearly saw he loved his brother. How do you think he is going to react to all of this? Because he saw his brother in his last moments. He's only just realized, and now his brother's died, and they are ignoring his brother's wishes in his mind. They're treating the body badly. How do you think that's going to play with Daemon?
So they have set up Daemon that anytime somebody dies, he is extremely suspicious it's a murder. He is suspicious of how the Strongs died. He's aware that what they're doing with Laenor will make it seem like they killed him. He's playing off the fact that he murdered Rhea Royce, and he's sort of messing with Lord Royce, I guess that was, or like a cousin or something like that. He has a mind for murder, and he sees it everywhere. So I think Daemon is going to assume that the chain of events went like this. Viserys shot down the high towers. Otto was upset about what happened at dinner, that Alison basically surrendered the cause to Rhaenyra, and then Otto killed him. I think that's what Daemon's going to assume, and that he's going to essentially take this as a personal affront to him that they actually murdered his brother to take the throne after and he was very upset with Alison and Otto about how he felt they were treating him, that they were keeping him drugged on milk of the poppy so they could rule in his name. So he already does not have high opinions of their motives. And I think this will be sort of like an inverse of what happened with Alison with the prophecy thing, where he's going to get the wrong idea and it's going to make him more furious than he would be than just the usurpation of the Iron Throne. He's going to make this a personal cause for himself.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that the him glowering across the Blackwater Bay and this is now personal suddenly takes a whole lot, because yes, the fact that Luke dies, or Lucerys dies, will make Rhaenyra angry, and Daemon will be a bit angry as well, just sort of like, hey, that's my woman's son. But it's just like, this is what was actually going to make him angry. What will make him angry is something terrible happening to his brother. So yeah, I think that the idea that he thinks this is a murder, I think is a really good one. I've got about 3 more questions from my patrons, so we'll try and pick up a couple of things from the chat as well before we end. Mara Lee saying, actually, moderators, I haven't thanked my moderators yet. Moderators, you're amazing. Thank you so much. If you're in the live chat, the reason why it's such a happy, thriving, wonderful place is not because of what we're talking about. It's because the moderators are keeping it that way, and they're doing an amazing job. If you could just show them a little bit of love there, I would hugely appreciate it, and they definitely deserve it. So thank you very much. Mara Lee saying there was talk about this show being 4 seasons long. I could see it being 3 seasons. How would the showrunners be able to do this, to be able to have enough story to be able to spread it for that long? So the 4 seasons long thing actually come from George R. R. Martin. It's not an official announcement, but him saying we could do this for 4 seasons. And that sort of echoes what we've had from showrunners in the past when they've been asked these questions on red carpets and things like that. I was initially of the view that 5 seasons would work best. I can now see 4 seasons. I would love your take on this, but my take, in my mind now, this is all about King's Landing changing hands at the end of each of these each season. So we've got season 1 up to the coup, effectively. Team Green take control. Season 1 goes up to Team Black taking control of King's Landing. Season 3 goes up to the point at which Rhaenyra has to flee and basically chaos erupts. And then at the end of season 4, we have the Hour of the Wolf and a new regime is put in place. So that's my take. It kind of works for me as a kind of a beating drum, a rhythm of how this works. But what do you think on 4 seasons to start with? And these are 4 long seasons. Let's not forget, if they carry on going, this is like over an hour each time. The Game of Thrones early seasons, it was only like 40-45 minutes per episode. So we're talking about, a good third extra per season, 10 episodes per season. So what's your take on 4 seasons and what sort of pacing we might have through it?
It is so classic George that as soon as his show starts going well, he's like, they should do more seasons. Like, he famously wanted like 12 for Game of Thrones or something like that. Like, he's a guy that always wants more once he gets going. Like, the shape of Game of Thrones itself is basically like the first 3 books are kind of narrowing, kind of going okay, kind of going okay. You get to Feast for Crows, and it goes like that. It just goes out like the detail he wants and the storytelling that he can see that's how his mind works. That's what makes his writing so good. So if we're talking about like 5 seasons of House of the Dragon, just going off what we know from Fire and Blood, the biggest expansion would have to be the Moon of the Three Kings and everything having to do with King's Landing while the war is happening outside of it, I guess. But that would require quite a lot of expansion in terms of what we learn about it. It would be like an entire season of watching Mysaria and Larys kind of just fighting each other for control of King's Landing or something like that. Or just Larys fighting everybody, I suppose. It's I guess it's like, how much do you really want to see the complete destruction of King's Landing from the inside while there's this like armies dancing around each other on the outside? Because that's the greatest point for expansion, unless we're going to do the Regency. If you wanted to tack on the Regency for Aegon III and then his eventual rise, then I could see that being something that you could throw on for like a 5th season or something like that. But it's unclear where they're ending, so it's hard to say. I would hope that they wouldn't just... I mean, like, I love Larys Strong as a character. I love sort of learning more about him. I am not sure if they're going if they're going to want to let him basically take the reins for an entire season. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's I would love a Regency season. I think that is
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite, possibly my favorite bit of Fire and Blood. Actually, is that period. There was so much going on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a unique period in that the Targaryens aren't really in control.
Right.
Other people are doing stuff around the outside, but the Targaryens are technically still there. So it's a really odd situation in the history of House Targaryen. But I think they probably won't. I think they will probably end with the equivalent of that. I mean, I don't have it up in front of me. The equivalent of the great Cregan or Cregan Stark line, where
Mm-hmm.
he basically turns around and said, "Right, that's it. I'm going home," and he just like turns around and he's gone. So I think that's roughly where they're going to be ending it. Let's get to a question from 444. This is we're sort of branching out a little bit more from just thinking about the episodes here,
Mm-hmm.
saying, what do you think? Why do you think other recent fantasy TV shows couldn't recreate the magic of Game of Thrones? And a lot of different, obviously, big budget TV shows have come out recently. Is it a wrong analysis of why Game of Thrones succeeded? Is it a lack of talents, right, like Ryan Condal? Is it a desire to attract as wide an audience as possible, resulting in simplifying storytelling? I think it's an interesting one. My take is that the sort of the three big things which have come out, being the new Game of Thrones, have been The Witcher, Wheel of Time, and Rings of Power. I think I would agree that House of the Dragon has done the best job out of them, but for my mind, I've enjoyed all of them, and I think that probably says as much about the kinds of stuff that I enjoy. This is just my thing. I love high fantasy and high fantasy TV shows based off books that I love. Great. So trying to get under that, though, what is it that House of the Dragon has done that perhaps the others haven't quite managed to do? Do you have some idea of what the magic is here? I think there's an adherence to the text is very strong on this.
It sort of is. I mean, I think it's the way that it was written by George, specifically Fire and Blood, that you can make a show out of it without pissing off too many hardcore like book fans that are watching it with a checklist, waiting to see everything that happens exactly as they want it to. It's uncertain, so they can do it that way. I think that not having seen Rings of Power, and I have watched some of The Witcher. I think I watched season 1 or something like that. I didn't watch Wheel of Time myself. I think the thing that usually gets shows not getting to the level of Game of Thrones, as it were, is that for a lot of people who love Game of Thrones, it was more about the characters themselves rather than the fantasy universe it lives in. And that was a decision that they made kind of early on at Dan and Dave and HBO, is that they sort of sprinkled in the fantasy stuff, but you could watch it for the most part and just sort of read it as something like The Crown. Like that's been a large part of that show's success, is that it's more or less Game of Thrones, but without the fantasy stuff, and that's kind of been the heart of it. And a lot of people, and I know them from my comment section, that they love the characters. They don't particularly love thinking about weirwoods and prophecies and all this other weird kind of stuff. And they want to be immersed in a world. And it's the immersion that I think that usually gets people. Although clearly you and I are not those kind of people, as we're making video after video and stream after stream about the fantasy weirdness. That's the kind of thing that tends to turn off a general audience. And I think that's something that's been hard for the other shows to try and really nailed down, is the balance of caring about the characters as people and then also using that to get you to love the world they're in as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think the only other thing I would say is there is definitely something here to do with George R. R. Martin's ongoing involvement. He's not a showrunner, he's not a writer, but he is there to give advice, and he is there to be a sounding board, which I think is obviously different to Rings of Power because Tolkien is no longer around. It's also
Unless you're doing a
different
seance.
Yeah, it's also different to Wheel of Time. Brandon Sanderson, who wrote the last 3 Wheel of Time novels, is around, but Robert Jordan, who wrote the main bulk of it, is not. With The Witcher, it's really interesting because Andrei Sapkowski is still alive, but he has very deliberately taken himself out, not just from the TV show, also from the games. On the TV show, I was reading Lauren Hisrick, who's the showrunner there, said, I tried to get him involved. I said, do you want to write some episodes? Do you want to sort of be able to sort of clear stuff before we do it? And he said, no, all he wanted to be able to see the episodes before they aired. That was literally all he wants. He doesn't want any involvement in any of it, which gives them such a big, broader canvas to be playing with and allows them to go in slightly different ways, which means it has, season 2 in particular, has veered away a little bit more from the books. I don't think the writer cares about that, incidentally. I don't think he's got a problem with that in the slightest, but it's certainly a noteworthy thing, I think.
I also wanted to bring up a quick point from the chat. One of my mods, Curtis Franks, brings up a really good point that A Song of Ice and Fire is written like a television show, which it is, because George R. R. Martin made his money for most of his life being a TV writer. So a lot of these fantasy series were not written with a screen in mind. George has said in the past that, he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire to be unfilmable, but it doesn't mean he didn't write it in a way that could be adapted. A lot of these other ones are very clearly nowhere near nowhere in the back of the minds of any of these guys were like, this will be a TV show one day. And that kind of helps a little bit.
Well, certainly it wasn't in the back of Tolkien's mind that when he was writing his Second Age history, hey, I wonder how we will turn this one into a TV show. With The Witcher, I would argue that the short stories do work very well, but the further I don't know whether you've read the Witcher stories, but the further into the
first 2 books.
Novels you get, the further into the novels you get, the more it just moves around completely. I would say randomly. It's not random. It's very intentional, but the narrative shifts around to lots of different places and they play with the idea of story in and of itself, which makes it a lot harder. I'll be fascinated to see how they actually cover it when they get that far. But it's the first bit definitely works. Let's go to a question from the Brandalorian. Great name, by the way. Hey, everyone. I'm now on A Dance with Dragons. Yes, you're reading through Song of Ice and Fire. It's insane to me how in literally 1,000+ pages, every sentence feels important. What's your favourite aspect of George R. R. Martin's writing style? Also, shout out to Harry Lloyd for his work on the audio version of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Everyone should listen to it. On that second point, I will say, I've said this every single time this has come up, I have never come across a better marriage of narrator and story than Harry Lloyd reading the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. He just captures the tone of it absolutely perfectly. But in terms of George R. R. Martin's writing style, what is it that really works for you?
I think it's that the layers of depth. I think that's probably what they're talking about when they're reading it, how every sentence feels important. They aren't. Not every sentence is important, but the way that George writes and the ways that he puts different layers of meaning into places you wouldn't expect it is part of the reason that it makes it so good to go back and look through and to, find theories if you want, but also to find depth and different connections between different kind of characters, allusions and stuff like that, is that he has such a great depth of knowledge in his head, and he really has a way with words that it's. I talked about this in the video I put out yesterday about the singing dagger thing, and I was reading back through all of his phrases that he had said about Valyrian steel and how he was hinting at that there was blood magic involved with it, and eventually you get to the world of Ice and Fire and it kind of just says it that's what Qohor was doing, but it's the way that the descriptive language of how the blade seems to drink the light and how it has this really dark blood color to it. And I don't know, I've said it before, I think it's that his writing style is one that continues to reward you the more you pay attention to it. And not all writers are like that. I think that's the simplest way to say it.
Yeah, and I think actually that was roughly what I was going to say, but I think you've said it in a better way. The example I often give, there's a chapter I always forget exactly which chapter number it is. It's an Arya chapter when she's in Harrenhal, and she's in Harrenhal, and you read it, and she's there with Roose Bolton, and she meets a few other Freys and people like that. And this chapter operates on at least three different levels, because you, with the first time you read it, it's developing the plot for Arya, where she is, where she's going. The second time you read it, you go, whoa, hang on a moment. Now I can actually, you can, when you pay attention, you go, so actually what was happening here was, this is the moment when Roose Bolton was deciding he was going to change sides, when we get news coming in here from what is going to then turn into the Red Wedding, that plot line starting here. And you can see a second layer the second time you read it. But then there's also another layer of this kind of thematic stuff that you get going on. It's introducing us to characters, and you get this Roose Bolton picks like this old volume off of the shelves, and he flicks through it, and then he throws it into the fire. And that adds this kind of thematic, what is Roose Bolton's role here, and thematically what is he doing here, and so you get this extra layer. He's throwing away the old past and the bad things that show, the things from the past that many people would value, he doesn't value. This tells us a lot about his character. So there are many different layers. Each time you read it, you can go another layer down, and then another layer down, and then you get to like the word choices of things that, what does this tell you about, or link across to another place. Just look up things like blood bruise. That as a way to describe the sky, George R. R. Martin uses at very specific times to get you to link across between different places. Anyway, but yeah, it's the fact that it works on multiple readings and on multiple levels. Last question from my patrons, and then we'll maybe pick up on one or two from the chat. I'm just aware I don't want to keep Matt too long, but we've got a question just from Emma Shyman saying, "Hi Robert, and welcome back, Joe Magician. Most of my questions have already been asked, so this one is just for fun. If you each had a dragon of your own, what would you name it?" So what if you had a dragon, what would you name it?
I have such problem naming things. Like me coming up with names for my videos and stuff like that is just an agonizing process, and like things I've named in the past.
Well, tell you what, why didn't, if you don't want, I'll put this out to the chat. If you in the chat think of some good dragon names, and then we will pick the one that we like the most. But we'll go before that. We'll just have a quick
name it Darkstar.
You'd name it Darkstar.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There we go.
I'm going to do the cop out and get one from the chat. But Darkstar is definitely a good name. Let's have a quick flick through. Dean Brown saying the opening paragraph of The Hedge Knight is a perfect way to begin a story. You have questions, interest, and a sense of the scene from the first moment. Yeah, absolutely. And that you get rewarded by a second reading as well. Roman Lakovet saying George R. R. Martin said that Roose Bolton was on the fence about switching sides even as late as his dinner with Jaime and Brienne. Fran Laurie would make good narrators, says Sword of the Morning, but that's not a surprise. Yes, they definitely would. Ian Glenn is getting a lot of shouts out in terms of narrators. Char Frey saying Arya's final chapter in The Clash of Kings, definitely one of the best in the entire series. Yep. Let's have a quick at a few suggestions. Sky Dancer, Goat Burner. That one's a good one.
Well, that's kind of the question. Are you naming it Valyrian? Are you naming it like the more modern dragon names? Or is it something for you?
For me, yeah. So, I mean, I would want to call it something like Blame Bloodraven, just so that everybody,
of course,
whenever they're saying it, they have to say that. But I think just to end on a slightly law-ish thing, it's very noticeable that the early Targaryens in Westerosi history, at least, named their dragons after Valyrian gods.
Sure.
Then, as it goes through, they start not doing that. You can kind of understand the House of Velaryon, sea smoke, because they're more about sea and things like that. But then it starts becoming more and more of dawn and things like that. Is just no, this is not now Valyrian. This is just, it is still a dragon, but you're naming it in the way of the culture that you are now a part of. And I think that's deliberate by George R. R. Martin until we get to Daenerys, who is just naming them after people that she knows who've died. So it's a subtle thing that George R. R. Martin has done to show how House Targaryen has moved further and further away from its Valyrian heritage.
Although I do like the idea that the Valyrian sounded dragon names are exactly the same. It's just that they sound more like they sound more grand because we don't know the language. Like, what if in High Valyrian, like Balerion actually means like sheep stealer or something? I think that'd be great.
That would be great. Absolutely, yeah. I like that.
I mean, we can know what it means now because they've made up the language. But I can imagine George would enjoy himself that these elaborate fantasy sounding names are no different than the dumb ones that we get later in the series.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, they were gods. That's what we were told, was they were Valyrian gods. But we still don't. Although we've had some things in House of the Dragon, we've had some extra hints about Valyria, which was completely unexpected. But we still haven't had much about their religion. But maybe that'll come if we do get sort of an Aegon's conquest thing. A few Ginger Snap is a good name. Yeah. So Jed Colin says Eldrick Stoneskin, Colin the Dragon.
And
Robert Gorski suggesting Puff the Magic Dragon. Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah, lots of great names. Sir Pounce, the first of his names, says Joseph Dredd. Yeah, okay, excellent suggestions. Okay, Matt, why don't you sort of round us up? Is there anything that you've been burning to say, or a theory to share with us before we go?
A theory to share with you. Boy, what can I give away that won't hurt me in the future when I make it into a video? I've been thinking a lot about Viserys' dream, and I've been thinking a lot about how it compares to other dragon dreamers, and I'm questioning its origins, I think is to say. I'm not sure if it means what we think it means, and that if it, especially with the example of Helena, there seems to be a big difference between the two of them that is a very strange, and I love strange, weird things that are incongruous. So that's something I've been kind of kicking around in the back of my head.
Excellent. So potential video incoming there. I think this is one thing I would definitely agree, is that the potential for the original prophecy to be misinterpreted by the time it gets to, say, Rhaenyra is huge. Simply having a dream and then it becoming a song and something you scribble on the side of a dagger and then passed down, it just by the time it gets to Viserys and then Rhaenyra, it could be quite different to what the original
I mean Viserys' dream, not Aegon's.
Viserys' dream.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've been thinking about that one a lot more.
Okay, well, and there we go. That's if you're interested in that, then at some point in the future, go and check out Joe Magician. And where could people find Joe Magician if they wished to?
Well, because YouTube just is doing a thing called Find Our YouTube Handles. You can find me at youtube.com/Joe Magician. Your mods have been very kindly been dropping all the links in the chat. After the show tonight, I'll be going live with the wonderful Lady Gwyn and Yoke Boy at 10:15 p.m. Eastern time. Same as every episode we've done. Gonna do an immediate reaction. Oh, this one will be funny. It's the same thing as last week where I had seen the episode already and Sanrixian didn't. Lady Gwyn and Yoke Boy will not have seen it, which I think, without revealing anything, Robert, this will be a funny one to see how they're gonna react knowing what happens. Also, you can check out my podcast feed. All my videos and all my live streams get re-uploaded to the podcast called The Wit and Wisdom of Joe Magician, lightly edited usually. I take out a lot of the ums and likes and that kind of thing. So if you don't have time to sit around and watch a YouTube video for 2 hours, you can just listen to it as a podcast if that's up to you. And what else? Can find me on Twitter at the Joe Magician, because someone else took my name a while back and I can't get it from them. Very annoying. I usually, during the show, I've been doing a lot of like live tweeting and that kind of stuff. So if you want to check all that out, it's all available to you. All the Joe Magician all the time.
Awesome, and you can never have too much Joe Magician in your life. Right, in terms of this channel coming back on Thursday, I've got another live stream, my usual Thursday live stream. That next time is going to be a roundup, wrap up of Rings of Power. So if you've watched the whole season and you've got some questions burning at the back of your mind, then that will be the live stream for you. And I've got a special guest on for that one as well. I'll make you disappear for just one moment so I can point at things. If you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here will be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here will be a link to my Patreon page. Patreon is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure and a delight. Thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you, moderators. And also everyone who's donated hugely. I think we got up to, what would we get up to? Quite a high number. It was a good number, 6,200, something like that.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But anyway, take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.